We're just kind of going for it. I'll tell you about that later. And I guess if you're not if you're gonna join after this, let me see. Oh, I see it. It goes live officially in 5 minutes. I guess not. All right, we are back in town. We're pretty tired. We're getting less tired by the minute, but still tired. And the reason that I'm doing this today instead of doing what we wanted to do, which was to give some notice, like maybe do it another day or two. Um, we have some other videos we want to put out, and we have a really big storm that's coming right now, and that might screw everything up. So if that happens, this will end. So if I just disappear suddenly, um, that's where I went. Is that there's a big storm that's coming, and our internet kind of sucks when the time comes. Can you hear me? Okay. Just want to make sure because I've had problems with that before with this setup, and I every time we do a live, I uh, make a promise to myself to learn my gear better, which I don't do. So we got a ton of questions, which is good. And I'm going to see how many of them I can get through. If it doesn't work out because of the storm, I'll do another one of these, and maybe I'll even plan it so people can jump in. So let's see. Okay, good. Let me find the comments. I think I'll just go down them in a list. I think we might have an hour before we need to go run to my house real fast and get all wet. So yeah, Jeff is still in catch up mode. So am I. I mean, after a trip like that where it was only a week, but when you're doing completely off grid type of work, you don't just come back. It's more than being gone on vacation or something for a week because you're missing all the text messages, anything that's happened in the world in the last week you don't know about, and it's amazing how disorienting that can be sometimes within 1 week. Certainly, I've done that for multiple weeks before, and you come back and there's like whole new memes that you don't have any idea what they mean. It's pretty fun. All right. Let's get into this stuff. And you might have noticed that some of our videos have been slower too. It's just because we've been super busy. But we got lots of good stuff to talk about. All right. First question. I'm not going to pronounce all the names. Maybe I'll pronounce part of it because I'll butcher it. That's the thing I'm the worst at probably is reading screen names. Question: when y'all release a rattlesnake in one of those rat dens, how do you know that the den doesn't already have multiple snakes living in it? Or if it's overpopulated, wouldn't it cause snakes to leave the den looking for more suitable living conditions? Well, first we don't. And we're actually kind of hoping that there are other snakes in there. If there are other snakes in there, it means that we are correct in our assessment of the area. Rattlesnakes are social. So if there are rattlesnakes in there, it doesn't mean that there's any problem whatsoever. The exception to that is if it's a male. If you put a young male into a pack rat nest and there happened to be a larger male in there, especially a larger male with female or females, then he might chase that snake out. But that's not something that wouldn't happen in nature anyway. So it's not ideal, but we also can't be sure. And we know that those are the correct places to put the snakes. As far as overpopulated, the way that we address that is we don't have any go-to drop-off locations. That's why every time you see us going out to go release a snake, we're hiking, we're searching, we're looking for places to go. I have seen some organizations and some fire departments like a lot more. They just have a drop off point and they just take the snake there and let it go in one spot. Then you could have problems with those things. But what we do in relocating a snake is we Each one is a one-off situation, so the distribution of new snakes never gets to a place where it's going to be more or less than the wild uh, fluctuation. Anyway, I almost said wild flatulence. That's how today's going. Okay, next question. And I will try to get to the ones in chat too. So if you see something there, let me know. How do Mojaves know not to breed with speckles? And the same for other venomous snakes. Is it smell, by sight? Thanks in advance. Love your channel. Thank you. Appreciate that. Also scared to death of snakes, but appreciate their purpose. So that's good. That's always my favorite thing is when, you can be scared of snakes. That doesn't go away, but it's a choice to protect the fear as if it's a good thing. So the question is I'll expand on it. How does a species of rattlesnake know not to mate with other rattlesnakes? And it's because they're not the same species. And that sounds oversimplifying it, but let's say, why would you, when you're at the zoo and you see the chimps, do you not get all excited about that in ways that would make me have to click not for kids when doing the YouTube meta thing? It's because you recognize your own species. So I think a lot of that is that there's a misunderstanding when people are talking about snakes in general. People talk about a saying I hear a lot is that people want to understand the different breeds of rattlesnake, kind of like the way dogs are. But each rattlesnake they're not breeds or versions or morphs. They are distinct individual species that each one can tell what it is, what it smells like. Their habits are different. All that doesn't mean there aren't hybrids that occur, though. It does happen sometimes. There are occasionally hybrids. There's one area that we're looking at that it looks like tiger rattlesnakes and speckled rattlesnakes are hybridizing. There's an area I was just at on the Arizona-New Mexico border where prairie rattlesnakes and Mojave rattlesnakes tend to all interbreed. So it's not perfect, but they can tell the difference just by largely smell. Wild flatus, like what I slept on. Yes, that was wild. And I got to clarify too, because I was reading some of the comments on that. More on Facebook than here. But the situation that I slept in there, I didn't make that situation. I was wondering why so many people were thinking that that it was an embarrassing story to tell. And then I read further and they thought that I fell asleep and then made my bed, so to speak, which is not the case. So just to clarify what that was. However, I'm run across a wild hybrid. No. There's been some that maybe are on the fence. We weren't quite sure, but as far as I can recall, there's none that we've come across that are wild hybrids. Let's see. I was wondering, how do you go about teaching young children what to do if they come around a rattlesnake? You're in SoCal and you have a close call with Southern Pacific last year, and that's what got them started watching us. Great. So I have a young kid. I have a 6-year-old. That should have come out of my mouth faster. I'm tired, but we face that. So we moved up to this area when she was 3, and there are many rattlesnakes here. And it was kind of an interesting thing because I got to learn about whether basically if I'm full of shit or not, because we have a young kid in this area. And I got to test my own lesson and my own methods and see if when faced with this, that I actually feel the same way as what I tell people to do. And it was not a surprise, but also a relief to say yes. Still did not feel any desire to kill rattlesnakes. Still saw that treating it as a preventative situation is the way to go to keep them safe. And what we would do when we taught our daughter, and that is to separate the topics of fear and safety. And what we would do when we taught our daughter, and that is to separate the topics of fear and safety. And safety and safety and awareness. So awareness, being aware of your situation and not touching rattlesnakes, not stepping on rattlesnakes, which is more or less how those accidents happen. I mean, it's pretty easy to teach a kid, like, hey, don't go pick up snakes if you don't know what they are. That just is how you would normally teach a kid. But teaching awareness is a different thing. So first, don't teach awareness by teaching kids to be fearful of snakes, because being fearful does not make you more aware. It might just impair your judgment a little bit when you're trying to stay calm or remain aware. You might have emotional reactions to situations rather than rational ones. And aside from that, that's how people become scared of snakes. If you're really scared of snakes, is because somebody told you when you were a kid that you need to be scared of snakes, and it never goes away. So we teach our kid awareness. So when we see a rattlesnake out in the yard, when she was 3, up on my shoulders she would go. We would go outside and we'd look at the snake together. I would let her find the snake in the rocks or whatever and point it out to me. And she loves rattlesnakes. She loves snakes. She loves wildlife. She loves things that it's amazing what kids do when you just never tell them that they have to be scared of everything. It doesn't mean she wants to be, she loves wasps. It doesn't mean that she wants to be stung by a wasp. It doesn't mean that she doesn't understand that she should not mess with a wasp nest. It just means that when she sees a wasp, she isn't like freaking out and posting, oh my gosh, what is this, all over Facebook, like half the, much older generation is doing on my Facebook page every day. So focus on those things. You don't have to teach kids to be scared of snakes. Teach them to be aware. Teach them to look around corners. There's a game that I have wanted to develop for a long time. I just haven't ever organized it. And I've taught other parents to do this, and it's worked well from those reports, is to play games that teach situational awareness. So get an old pepper shaker, an old toy, like something that doesn't look like anything else, and put it occasionally in places around the property, around the yard, by the door, places where rattlesnakes could be. And if the kid finds it and tells you about it, give them a cookie or something like that. The point is that they're going outside every time they're out there. They are checking the corners, they're looking everywhere, and they're training themselves to be aware of those little small spaces. And aside from that, the third road of this is just general education. Teach them everything that you can about animals, about snakes. Not only because it makes the fear diminish, but makes them equipped, makes them aware, it makes them understand the difference between fear and awareness, which is a pretty big deal. So if you want any specifics, I can help with that. This is something that very much depends on where you are in your parenting style. But that's pretty much it. You don't have to teach them to be scared. Teach them to be aware. What I would like to know is, when I relocate these snakes from my yard, I know they are being released into their territory because I moved them just outside the clearing. Here's a question. We get Mojaves and Sidewinders. Is a difference in what to look for these two species while releasing them? He's just been releasing them outside the clearing to make sure they drop into a hole. So there are small differences in the way you could release those snakes, but there are some Patrick species, that Mojave rattlesnakes and Sidewinders, if you're finding them both in your yard, they actually use that area pretty similarly, even though their lives are different. So same general principle. So when you're releasing an animal into deep, dark cover, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to stay there forever. What you're giving them is the ability to go out and seek and reorient with a node of safety. They can creep back out into the world and figure it out and come back if it's not working out. So you don't have to find a permanent home. So more than anything, I think that, like, if you were just trying to boil it all down to across all species and areas, as long as you stay within what you believe their home range to be and release them to the deepest, darkest cover that's available, they will figure it out. Also, I have to say, I really appreciate people thinking this way. It is one of the most difficult and frustrating, increasingly frustrating situations that I'm aware of, is that relocating snakes is becoming more and more popular. I think that's a great thing. I start feeling a little bad about it because I feel like sometimes we help with that. I think there's people that see what we do and want to do it too. But that second part of putting the animal where it needs to go is not optional. And I'm seeing every day people catch a snake and then they just take it out to the desert and dump it off on the hot ground, and which, they might as well just cut its head off at the beginning because they're just killing it with extra steps. So I really appreciate paying attention to those particulars. What's my favorite snake that I keep right now? I don't know. I like lots of them. I have a huge ringneck snake right now. I think that's probably the one that I come in and check on the most. I guess that's how I would tell. Is by what snake I look at first when I come into my building. I would pull it out right now, but it ate a long-nosed snake yesterday, so I don't want it to regurgitate that. They are snake eaters. They're venomous. They're highly venomous to other snakes, and it's the kind of thing that, it's about 2 feet long, which is a really big ringneck snake, very big. If it were a snake that was 5 feet long, it would probably be scary because they're, again, very venomous, interesting animals, but because they're small, it's like having a little mini cobra. They're cool. What would I say to a person who is snake phobic? How do you convince people to not kill snakes? So those are two questions. They're kind of the same, actually, if you think about it. So somebody that's snake phobic, the thing I would say to them, and we do is we talk about this. If you ask people to remember to think back to why they became scared of snakes, why are they scared of snakes? Most people will recall a situation that was scary to them because of snakes that would depend on already being scared of snakes. So somebody says, well, I'm scared of snakes because I saw one in my yard when I was younger and it surprised me. Or saw a snake when I was younger and my brother chased me with it through the yard. That wouldn't be scary if you didn't already fear snakes. So that's not it. The real answer to this is one that you're not going to remember, because phobia doesn't always start with an event that is one that you can remember. A lot of times it happens as when you're a kid. So I won't go too deep into this, but there's some interesting things about how fears and phobias are formed. But with snakes, with spiders, we have an innate ability to detect them, not fearful of them, but to detect them. If you show an infant pictures of random objects, the snake and the spider will hold their attention faster and longer. Not scared of it, but attention to it. In that moment, when that attention is wide open looking at that animal, that pattern, if negative sounds come in, if a mother yells or makes a negative sound or something, there you go. You're scared of snakes. And if you are phobic of snakes, the first thing, if you don't want to be phobic, if you don't want to be fearful of snakes, is you have to decide that you don't want to be scared of snakes, because it takes work. And there's nothing that I can tell somebody or anybody can tell somebody that would make that just go away. What you can do is learn about your fear, learn about that the snake never did this to you. This is something that you imposed upon the concept of snakes. It's not based in rationality. Recalling a bunch of times that you were scared of a snake based on predetermined fear is not a snake scaring you lots of times. That's you being scared of snakes lots of times. Those are completely different things. And the start to learning about it. I mean, it was not intended to be this way. It's still not what it's intended for. But when people are just on our Facebook identification page and every day they see pictures of multiple snakes, they might not like it at first, but eventually, almost universally, people say that they are no longer scared of snakes, and it surprises them. They don't know when it happens. There's no time like, hey, I'm not scared of snakes now. They're just looking at pictures one day and they realize that, oh, this is a patch-nosed snake. I know something about patch-nosed snakes because I've seen these before. And there's, oh, wow, I guess, do I like this thing? Do I like this animal all of a sudden? And if you let yourself in, you are. So it's just kind of it's a path, but that's where you would start, is to look at your phobia, look at the fear you have towards snakes, realize that it has nothing to do with snakes. It's something that you are imposing on the concept of snakes, and then start learning to correct that by whatever means and ability you have to. How do you convince people not to kill snakes? That one's hard because, like fear, certain actions are protected as a term that I dislike, and that's common sense. Common sense. What we all think it means is that uh, these are things that, like, don't try to walk through a door, open the door first. Don't light your hair on fire. But if you have YouTube or former Live Leak or Reddit, you know that this is not common. These are things that people do. What I see a lot more of, especially when it comes in the context of snakes or killing snakes, is people using or other topics out there that are science oriented. People use the term common sense to say, at this point, I'm going to no longer allow thought. I will allow what thoughts are inherent to me, but up to a certain point, this common sense line. Beyond that, if you're thinking about it, you're overcomplicating it. And that's where the kill snakes thing comes in a lot. Because if people don't kill snakes, then it defies common sense. Because then you got rattlers around and they can kill your kids and dogs, right? When they don't realize is that that they're not actually helping themselves. Facts are, people that own properties and ranches that kill every rattlesnake that they see do not have fewer encounters or fewer bites or fatalities or loss of livestock than the properties that kill them all. It's probably the opposite, because the resources that they're providing, if you're actually looking at it from a more preventative, knowledgeable perspective, will be addressed. I go back into the same boring metaphors over and over again, but it's like swatting flies around the trash, and every time you swat a fly, saying, well, that's that, I don't have to ever deal with this again. Meanwhile, just letting the trash fester and never addressing it. So if someone is killing snakes, understand that they're not necessarily, just like the fear, they're not doing it because of snakes necessarily. It's because their perception of themselves as a useful protector of the family, protector of livestock, doing things based on common sense, rejecting further thought, rejecting deeper understanding of things that they might be fearful of. Those are all personal identity issues. So when you're telling somebody that they shouldn't kill snakes, don't talk to them about snakes. Deal with it as an idea that this person killing snakes is very important to them. And to tell them that they can't and that they're stupid for killing them is a personal attack on them, when you really want the same thing, which is for that snake not to bite a kid. It just so happens that the anti-common sense answer there, which is to not kill the snake, to prevent the snake, is the right answer. And if somebody is honest, that's a term I've used that has gotten some traction when I use it here and there. If somebody is actually honest about protecting their family and not just interested in virtue signaling, then they will hear that out. And I would present it as a challenge. If you want to kill them, that's fine. I mean, do your thing, but you're not helping anything. If you're actually meaning that, then you will set aside your ego and listen to people that are more knowledgeable than you. Do my snakes have names? No. I don't name them. Partly, there's a few reasons. The one I say the most, which is accurate, is for me, it's a personal safety thing. I just don't treat my rattlesnakes like pets. They're not pets. I certainly care for them. I enjoy keeping them. I've kept them. I have snakes in this building behind me, quite a few that I have known longer than my family. So I like them, but I also need to be aware that that I could be killed by them. So I don't cross that line. The other thing is, there's just a lot of them. We have a lot of animals that come and go. It's just easier to treat them kind of as specimens. It's more accurate. And it's a bummer when one dies. When you have 40 of something, I mean, we're going to lose one or two animals a year just due to old age or cancer or something. And when you deal with saving animals, there's a thing you have to manage, and that's compassion fatigue, where uh, I love Gila monsters. They're one of my favorite animals in the world, and probably once a year I have to crush one's head on the side of the road with a rock because it's dragging its guts behind it. I can't deal with that. So it's like if you had uh, you know, a dog rescue and nobody cared about dogs at all. In fact, they hated dogs, or they would drop off a dog with its ribs broken and its guts hanging out because they were scared of the dog and they hit it with bricks before calling you. And you had to uh, put that dog down by hand because there's no other way to do it. Um, you don't name your dogs. You don't name them. So in addition to safety, physically, I think mental safety, mental health wise, to do this in the long term, there's a reason to keep a little distance between myself and the animals I take care of. All right. Some other questions. What is the longest Western Diamondback I've ever seen or heard in Southern Arizona? 60 inches or so, maybe a little bit longer. I have seen a handful of snakes in Arizona that could be perceived at 5 feet or confirmed at just over. And by a handful, I mean like 5 or fewer. This always gets some fun comments when I say it aloud on Facebook or something about how a 5-foot rattlesnake is just a baby. But yeah, it's not. They just don't get very large, and people are shocked at how poor our judgment is when it comes to size. When you actually, as soon as a tape measure is produced, how animals quickly shrink. But yeah, that's about it. I would say 60 inches is that's an upper limit kind of snake. I can say there have been 2 that I did not have an opportunity to measure, but I think they were probably a little bit larger than that. One of them was on the side of the road eating a jackrabbit. So imagine the size of that animal. And then in a canyon adjacent to that, years later, in an area that we also found a coach whip shed skin that was 2 feet long from the cloaca to the end of the tail, and huge tracks everywhere. Right next to where I had seen that huge snake before, we saw another incredibly large diamondback that was probably about the same. So we call that canyon the Valley of the Giants, and we have yet to really explore it as thoroughly as we want. We might do that later this year, but those are the largest snakes I've ever seen in the state. Best herping advice for finding reptiles in and around the monsoon season. Go out a lot. This is the thing. There's no magic time. And a thing that I've noted and that Jeff has noted is that sometimes it's harder for us to find animals during the monsoon than it is other times of year because they're distributed. A month ago, somebody said, "Hey, go find 20 speckled rattlesnakes." I could tell you how long it would take to do that. And we would drive directly to where they are, or drive there and walk directly to where they are and do it. Right now, they're everywhere. Everything's distributed. So it's a little bit more disoriented. So I would say, spend a lot of time at night, check a lot of different habitat. Don't go to the places that everyone else goes to. The reason being that you're not going to be able to conduct your own study. I mean, that's the thing you want to do is pick the closest drainage to your house that you don't think people hike in. Make sure it's legal. Hike it in the morning, hike it at night, hike it whenever. Every time you see something, take a note of the time, temperature, moon phase, a few other things. When you go hiking in that wash and you see nothing, take note of that. None of that seems to make sense, but put it into a spreadsheet or something and then sort it someday. You don't have to do any detailed analysis. Just put it into Google Sheets or something. Keep track of this stuff for a year. get 200 records of any snake species you want, or just in general, 200 records, and then pick, temperature, air temperature, sort by it, and watch what happens. You'll start to notice trends. Use Google Earth, same stuff like that. So an easy way to do that doesn't cost you anything. Get Google Earth for your computer, or use Google Maps. Get anything that you can record GPS coordinates, and get a kestrel. Let me grab a kestrel. I'll show you what it is. Here it is. This is one of my old kestrel weather stations. With this, I can tell the humidity, wind speed, barometric pressure, dew point, a bunch of other stuff. You don't need it all, but start with temperature, maybe humidity. Pressure is good. You don't have to know what it means. Just put it all in there and watch what happens. It takes you 5 minutes to record those data, and then you're starting. So it seems like you're just collecting information, but that's the thing that makes you better and better about it. So it's no longer a series of random events. I know that was a long answer, but there's no one answer. That would be the biggest thing you can possibly do. That's when everything changed for me a long time ago, with literally the first handheld GPS unit that was under $1,000. Just going out and looking for trends. All right, gonna go back to the comments on this side. I'm gonna check that weather too, because is it coming? Not yet. All right, I got a little bit of time. Okay. I know both rattlesnakes and western hognose have keeled scales. I was wondering, how similar does my pet hognose feel to a rattlesnake? I enjoy watching the obvious love and respect we have for these vilified animals. Thank you. The answer is a hognose snake feels incredibly like a rattlesnake. It's pretty similar. I think the keels on a hognose feel a little bit more apparent, typically. But I would say, of the animals that you can hold, a western hognose feels the most like a rattlesnake. Would I ever release a California king in the same pack rat nest with a rattlesnake, or a totally different area? Yeah, I would. And this is a thing that, I think the concept confuses people sometimes, because they think that we are, our job is to preserve the lives of rattlesnakes. And it is not. Our job is to mitigate the immediate effects of human encroachment, of development that's there. And king snake is a natural predator of rattlesnakes. And I can say, I love rattlesnakes. And if I saw a king snake eating a rattlesnake, I would be incredibly excited about it and take notes and watch how that goes. It's not the rattlesnakes that we like. It's the Sonoran Desert. It's the system that's there. So we wouldn't put a king snake into that pack rat nest because there's a rattlesnake in there to try to feed it. But we're also, we're not going to try to avoid it either. If that's the place that it should be released and there happens to be a rattlesnake in there, then that's just how it goes. How much can a rattlesnake determine from their heat-sensitive pits besides the presence of something warmer? Let me read that again. How much can a rattlesnake determine? For example, can they detect size or movement? Okay. How much information are they getting from those heat pits? So there's probably more about this than I actually know. But directionality, size of prey, it might impact how much venom is put into the object. Differences being in defensive and predatory bites. Here's a thing that got me in trouble with herpers relatively recently, including a friend of mine, like writing a long rant about my ego, which is great, because what they were mad about is there was that story you might have seen from Phoenix Herpetological Sanctuary, where they put out a study, Cale Morris did a while back, where they went out and stepped on rattlesnakes with a leg. Didn't put a lot of pressure on it. And the number one comment from snake knowledgeable people was, "Well, if it had a heat signature, then it would have been a whole different thing." But that's not the case. So for defensive bites, so first Kale did check that there was no difference between in results between heated things and not. And then there was a publication, and that's what I was posting everywhere, was a publication from copperheads, which are also pit vipers that have, probably very similar utility of those organs to rattlesnakes, where they actually were testing to see whether, like, if it increases the likelihood of strike if something's warm or not, and it does not. They were more likely to flee. So it might seem that way, that they can see it, but being able to detect it because if it's heat pits does not make something more or less um, likely to strike. And that's a fact. I mean, it was a surprise to me when I first read that, but that's how it is. So their heat pits seem to have quite a bit of differentiation, like you're asking, between. It's not like they just see warm thing and there's an automatic response or automatic um, physical reaction to it. There seems to be a lot of different things that they can infer. I would maybe, and maybe incorrectly, approximate it to the way our vision works in a really rudimentary sense, where we have lots of information coming in that our brains can interpret in different ways. One thing that is light colored can be interpreted differently than something else that's light colored. And I don't know exactly the details of all of that. I do know that they will strike cold things. The reason that they don't strike our tongs is not because they're cold. A lot of times they're not cold. That's the thing, is that we're pulling up to a house. I live in Phoenix. It's I wish the tongs weren't. I wish they were cold. That'd be awesome. But there's a lot of times we get up there and grab those tongs and they hurt. They're hot. Snake doesn't ignore them or doesn't want to bite them because we're not crushing its ribs with them. Same question for their eyes. Can they detect size or species? Yeah, I think their vision is a lot better than is we can expect. I lots of times have rattlesnakes that are introduced to one another. They're smelling each other, of course, but they're also visually inspecting each other, and they seem to be able to differentiate. And I don't know a whole lot about their color vision. I'm going to make a note of that because that seems like something I would like to know about. How much does their sense of smell come into it? A lot. So rattlesnakes, anybody that keeps them or works with them, they know how much they're smelling things and how much they can differentiate. Our tiger rattlesnake, I've had this tiger rattlesnake since 2009. And even still, it won't eat a frozen thawed mouse. And doesn't depend on what the mouse looks like. It wants a wild mouse. And it's not a kangaroo mouse. It's like I've tried all these wild mice. It'll eat any of them. They love it. But any captive born mouse does not want them. So they can tell really finely. They can tell individuals apart. Their sense of smell is pretty good. In addition to this, too, I mean, this is something that people ask about. Why snakes have forked tongues? They have stereo smell. I mean, they have two different directions, so they can tell directionality. Something we just smell, it smells like one thing, right? But they can tell the direction that a smell is coming from, which is amazing. So yeah, their sense of smell is pretty important to them. You put it all together and you have an animal that has pretty highly advanced senses. Okay, there's more to this question. Part of why I asked is a few years ago, my younger brother, was working on a plow and felt something strike his leg. Again, and then again another time. He looked down, saw a prairie rattlesnake around the Great Plains strike at his leg. Fortunately, he was wearing loose lidded bib overalls and the fabric was hanging away from his legs. The rattlesnake clearly seemed to be aiming at the fabric instead of going into the skin. Yeah, that's what it is. I don't think they can tell. I don't think it matters. I don't think that they're seeing something warm or something that's slightly cooler. Keep in mind, rattlesnakes, when they're young, and a lot of rattlesnakes throughout their lives, eat lizards. Lizards are a large part of their prey, of their diet. And lizards are not warmer than the outside environment. So I would assume for your younger brother um, that it was just the movement, or maybe he was stepping on it, or maybe the animal was injured. We're just surprised the snake. I don't think that, and certainly in the published literature on defensive response to warmer items, it hasn't shown up in either instance that has been examined. And in my experience too, they'll more likely go after something that is making a presence in front of them. I had that, a good example of that this weekend. I had a prairie rattlesnake. I was in New Mexico, and I had a prairie rattlesnake that I had under my hat so I can get some photos of it. And I took the hat off, and I wanted it to look sideways so that I could get a good photograph of the side of this animal. It just wanted to look at me, and I was shaking my hat over off the side, and even touching it with the hat, and it just didn't care. It wasn't because I was warm. It knew that I was the problem and that the hat was an extension of me. So there's a lot of other things other than just pure senses. They're able to think this through, I think. And then another part of this question, one question that comes occasionally, is the subject of snake boots. Many people around here swear that knee-high or thigh-high rubber irrigation boots are best. Of course, rattlesnake fangs can easily penetrate them. Ask a number of neighbors about them, and they can say that people wearing them don't seem to be struck by rattlesnakes. On boots, the thing that people overlook a lot of times is that it's not necessarily the material itself as being one that fangs can't penetrate as much as it is the space. So my boots, I don't have them in here right now. The boots I wear insulated hunting boots. And they're not that hot. I mean, I hear people say like, "Oh, you're in Phoenix, how your feet get hot." You're walking on ground that's 160 degrees. So, yeah, it's not heat goes both ways. So, anyway, the thing that it comes with that is that there's a 1/2-inch space that's there, and then you wear loose jeans over them. So I would say if you're wearing those loose rubber boots, even if a fang could get through them, it's still helping because you're creating space between your tissue and the fang. So if you are wanting to wear, like I wear muck boots in Peru or in different places, and they're like, it's not going to stop a bite from a fertile ants or something, but it can certainly help. The venom is pretty much going to go out onto whatever the first surface is, and I'd rather that be on a baggy pant leg than my calf. So anything is better than nothing. Loose fitting jeans around the base and boots with either air or insulation in them, that's pretty good protection. I mean, don't test it, but if they're wearing rubber irrigation boots, they're not suffering bites, not because the snakes don't care, like they can't see through the rubber or something. It's just that, well, first, they're probably just not being bitten. I imagine there's probably a good deal of confirmation bias going on just as a community. And this, they're just not being struck at. That's probably the other thing. But yeah, I would wear those if I worked in those fields. Okay, let's see. We're almost all the way done with the comments. This is great. Not that I want to be here, but they're good questions too. They're not the same ones. How do Sonoran gopher snakes climb stucco walls, getting 12 feet off the ground or more? Come to Sierra Vista. Okay, we go to Sierra Vista a lot. So gopher snakes, king snakes, coach whips, rat snakes in the east, a number of other snakes, they're very good at climbing. They're made for it. They can articulate their belly scales and ribs and all that, so they can get up. They can use very small imperfections in the surface to climb up. They also seem to be a little bit maybe more intelligent. I mean, they'll figure things out. I've watched gopher snakes get up situations and out of situations that I'm very surprised that they would. But they spend a lot of time going up into trees to eat birds and raid birds' nests and just kind of go all over the place. That's one of the reasons that gopher snakes are so successful all through Phoenix, is because they also eat non-native rodents and the abundance of pigeons and doves that are in town. They'll eat roof rats. So that's an animal that's made to do that. Um, if you look at stucco, it's pretty rough, and if they find a little corner, they can usually figure that out. A rattlesnake, not saying that they absolutely can't, but that wall would have to be in really bad shape. Rattlesnake's body style in its life is entirely different. So they do have an ability to climb, but it's not as good. They're not able to articulate their bodies in the same way that a gopher snake can to climb up just any rough surface. So I'll see if I can record that at some point. We're doing some behind me in my office, or the main room here. I have a testing area. We're trying to find additional ways to add things to our rattlesnake fencing, to where people that are fearful of snakes might be able to see fewer of all kinds of snakes. But it's tough when you have gopher snakes that are good at things like that. All right, I'm going to go to these other questions first. Let's see. Yeah, Michael, that's a good point. It says nobody chops up every car they see because their cousin was killed in a car wreck. I actually say something pretty similar to that pretty often. I mean, when you're looking at when people that kill every snake they see expecting safety, it's like if you built your house next to a freeway and you shot at passing cars instead of building a fence, or like, you know, petitioning to have the speed limit reduced or something like that. Like, it's just, when you actually look at it and remove the idea of snakes from the picture of how people deal with problem snakes, it just looks ridiculous. Are there any twin spotted rattlesnakes in captivity, or can anyone outside the state of Arizona legally keep one via permit? Yes, we have 4 twin spotted rattlesnakes in the room behind me, actually. Can someone outside of Arizona legally have one without a permit? That's a tricky question. So, many of the ones, if not most, just south of all of the twin spotted rattlesnakes that are in captivity in the United States, are either illegal or illegally sourced and recovered. And what I mean by that is somebody poached them, and then they are reobtained by the authorities, and then they're distributed to a zoo or an institution. It also means that somebody could come here from another state, capture one in Arizona illegally, and then take it out of state. So at that point, they're not subject to Arizona's laws, but that's a federal law. That's a Lacey Act, which says that for wildlife, you can't come into Arizona and take a protected animal and take it back to Texas and sell it. You're breaking down a federal crime, but it happens. In fact, if you're in Cochise County and you see Texas plates, this is I'm sorry to make this sound so like bigoted, but there are a tremendous number of animals that leave Arizona to go to Texas or Florida, that then either are distributed elsewhere in the country, or to Europe, where they are, they end up back in the U.S. one way or the other. So animals that are actually collected legally, bred legally, distributed legally in the United States, not too many. We all know that. I mean, if you look on like any website that sells venomous snakes, you're going to see all kinds of, Huachuca locality, blacktails, stuff like that. That's all illegal. You can't come into Arizona, collect something, take it out of state to sell its offspring or its the adults. People do. So no, you can't really. I mean, you can get a permit to get one in another state, but that animal being legal, if that's important to you, probably not. That is actually the reason that we are breeding them, is because here in Arizona, places like ours, we can use them so people can learn about twin spotted rattlesnakes. But we couldn't get one, and we were just on this list waiting for somebody to poach an animal, which of course, that sounds bad. Like the whole thing, we can't teach people about snakes because we're waiting for someone to poach one. So I wrote a proposal to Game and Fish to ask if, like, hey, there's this problem here, None of these organizations, even the zoo at the time, didn't have a ridge-nosed rattlesnake that I we were also doing this with. So how about if I go collect a couple of them under permit and then breed them so that we can get these out to organizations for legally. So there's some actual legal stuff here. So that was a big long answer. Sorry, but yeah, I've tried gerbils. If you're talking about my tiger rattlesnake, I've clicked every box. I've tried them. I got to eat a young quail one time. That was about it. But it's also, I've had that snake for a really long time. So at that point, if it just wants to eat wild stuff, I get it. It's old enough now too, that where it doesn't eat that much. It eats about every 2 months. So it's not like that big of a deal anymore. Jaffo, I appreciate what you're saying here. I really, it's good to hear. I mean, I know that probably people don't even think about snakes really, or if they do, they think of negative. And then I think that, you have to give yourself some credit, because a lot of people that feel differently about snakes, if they watch what we're doing, it's because you're open to learning about it. And, we all know that there's a lot of people right now, probably always has been, but it feels more like right now, that are just immune to new information and view all new information as a challenge. So the fact that you're learning and changing your mind is, it's great. I've shown numerous times that rattlesnakes are not naturally aggressive towards people. Yeah. If rattlesnakes attacked things that were walking by, you'd be watching a blank screen right now. I'd be dead a long time ago. Do Eastern Diamondbacks typically have the same behavior or demeanor? They have their own set of behaviors, just like anything else. So the Eastern Diamondbacks are probably one of the rattlesnakes that I have spent the least amount of time around. I've probably seen in the wild maybe just shy of 30 ever, if that. And they're just big secretive animals. Actually, if I were to really characterize my experience with them, they're very reluctant to rattle. They just want to crawl off into the bushes or sit there. They're likely to ignore you. There are reasons why these really large 5-foot plus animals often exist in now neighborhoods in Florida for decades undetected. And they're just very secretive animals. So, I mean, I think they're that could be a response to the urbanization, but I think that's also just kind of their way, is that, you live in an area that has a very different relationship with cover than the desert does. When I go to Florida, that's the big thing that's interesting, is of where are the rocks? I don't understand how anything works anymore. And they're using vegetation. They're on the surface a lot more. So it makes sense to have behavior that is, a little bit more dynamic. Let's see. I have heard that cottonmouths can be aggressive towards people if not provoked. Yeah, it's a myth. Trying to say this without stepping in it. The Southeast and misinformation about snakes and wildlife in general it seems to be an important part of the culture. So no, cottonmouths, water moccasins, they do not chase after people. I've seen lots and lots of them. They open their mouth. That's why they get that name. That's what their actual defense is the thing that they're named after. They're not called chase moccasins. They're cottonmouths. They sit in one spot. They open their mouth and have white tissue inside, and that's scary. That's what's supposed to work. They will flee the other way. If you're in a canoe in the water, one might swim up and try to get into the boat, not because it's trying to attack you. It's because it's trying to get out of the water. It doesn't know what a kayak is. There's all kinds of different ways that you can justify it, but no, they don't drop out of trees into people, all that stuff. And I think everybody knows that. I just think it's something that everybody grows up hearing all these stories, and then they hear somebody that has a different accent from the other side of the country say that doesn't happen. You can understand how that goes over. Cottonmouths are an important part of the culture in the places that they live, and they're their mythological set of behaviors is also important. So just like I was saying earlier about people that kill snakes, you'll never convince somebody that is scared of water moccasins that they don't chase people by stating directly with as much evidence as you want, with as much factual information as you want, that that's not the case. Because the reason that they're saying that is not because of information; it's because of cultural identity and other things. So yeah, you can hear all that stuff, but it doesn't happen. Let's see. How difficult would it be to do a reintroduction project for some of the more rare species in your state? Herpetology professor attempted a project to introduce timbers to an isolated island in Massachusetts. So, interestingly, that's what Jeff and I were doing in Mexico. And I won't speak to it too much because I want the project stakeholders to the Rattlesnake Conservancy and the other parties to kind of take lead on that. But I can say that what we were doing is working with locating an endangered species of rattlesnake with the intention of repatriating it to historic areas where they're more or less extirpated, and establishing some captive breeding populations in advance of them dying out, not waiting until there's 3 animals left and doing it. When it's done properly, and I believe that we're doing it properly, I think it can work really well. And I'll talk more about this later, but the thing I'm most excited about is that on this project, when some of those snakes were relocated, we were using some of the same methodology that we use when we're just doing our normal relocations here. We're selecting proper microhabitat, not just habitat, but finding the hole to put them in, the specific spot to put them in, and the timing, using the heat of the day as a suppressive force to hold the animals in place so they spend more time there so they don't just crawl out immediately. It seems to have worked because the next day, the animals that were released were all in exactly the same place. So I think that all those little details together can make the difference between something like that succeeding and not. The bigger questions are, I think, the ethics, and then the elephant in the room that, you might never want to, these are words that get people to never want to talk to you again, but this is what we're doing. And use the same grace that you show when you open up to learn about rattlesnakes with this. But climate change is a killer of not animals as much as environments. So if you are going to relocate animals to a new environment or repatriate an environment that is itself dying, then it doesn't matter what you're doing with the snakes. You have to figure out ways around that. So it's a big, complicated thing that unfortunately ends up being having politics in it, when all the information, the people that are actually on the ground working on animals that are imperiled by it, don't have the same perspective on. All right, let me go down these other ones. Does the project involve Crotalus willardi? Yes, it does. Been calling them willards for 45 years, even though I believe the more common name is ridge-nose. Yep. Crotalus willardi or Crotalus willardi obscurus is what we're working with. Actually, on our Facebook page, you can get a little summary of the project we were working on: the New Mexico ridge-nose rattlesnake, or obscurus, for good reasoning is the way it's called. That they're hard to see. It's something a lot of people have lived their whole, if you have seen every rattlesnake in the U.S. and you're missing one, it's obscurus. So may have missed my calling, even though I love chosen career. Yeah, a lot of people have not seen these animals, but we have some cool stuff to show you in the future. Really, we recorded all of it. We're gonna have some other good information. May have missed the video. What happened to our man-made rattlesnake den? It's still going. I mean, this is going to take several years for it to really take. So what we saw is that animals used it through the early part of the winter. I did not locate any snakes there when I went out there for a return trip in the spring, but also the time that I thought that having a week down there to monitor, I thought it was going to be normal springtime weather, but for some reason we just had a really cold snap. So it was freezing, like literally freezing cold then. So I wasn't expecting to see anything. We're going to make some other modifications this year where we're going to add more cover to better emulate a couple of other nearby dens. And then going to continue to work on the existing dens at the bunkhouses because I think there's still some access problems there. But it's going to take some time. But I feel good about it still. I think that we're using the model correctly. Everything looks good. I think temperatures are good. I think it's just the question here now is how long does the process of moving the animals there take before they are established? So we will definitely let you know. It's very interesting to me, obviously, but these are projects that take years, and there's just not enough information right now to make a good follow-up video other than what I just said. No question. Just want to let you know my uncle says hi. Hi, Greg Engel's uncle. How you doing? What snake species has the most rare encounter I've assisted? What snake species the most rare encounter? Well, I think any of the non-native things. I think the one though that people can't have here is probably the rarest one. It's actually here. It's the timber rattlesnake. If you look at the video, we have the little baby timber rattlesnake that Marissa got at a warehouse in Central Phoenix. It's now 2.5 feet long. It's a bigger snake. It's growing crazy. That is, as far as I've been able to tell, the only record of any timber rattlesnake found in Arizona, not brought here as part of a captive collection, but by whatever means, it's the only timber rattlesnake ever in Arizona. It's the only one that I've ever seen out here. I've seen lots in the East, but so even things that we don't get on calls, there's also a difference too, a notable one. We're working on right now a field guide, and it's a little different. It's just for Phoenix right now. We're going to make different ones, but I want to make more of these really hyper localized information sets for people. If you are for people that don't like snakes or people that don't care for them, that see them in their yard, people we talk to every day. If you're your average Scottsdale homeowner and there's a snake with bands on it in your backyard, it's not helpful to get a book this thick to identify that animal, when in reality just the location alone can narrow it down to one or two snakes. And the way that a biologist looks at snakes is different than the way somebody that's scared of snakes looks at snakes and notices things. So the key diagnostics are different. So we're putting together a field guide based on that. And one of the things that was very apparent too is that we're also listing organisms or the animals by likelihood of encounter. And the reason that that's interesting and relevant to your question is when we were in the city and we're looking at likelihood of encounter, ball python, which is a non-native pet that people release or escapes a lot of times, ball pythons, boa constrictors, and corn snakes are all much more common than native animals like a patch-nosed snake, a black-headed snake, the leaf-nosed snakes, ring-neck snakes. These are all animals that are common in their environments but not common in the city and uncommonly encountered. So when we talk about words like rare, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. But I'd say by objectively, our timber rattlesnake is the rarest snake that we have encountered in our work in Arizona. And I'm glad I have it. It's an awesome little dude, or girl, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad. Thanks for everybody. I dropped that video just because I realized that it's not like us to just drop off the earth for a while. And I was starting to hear people speculate that one of us got bit or something. It's not. It's just you might have noticed, like this whole time I've been talking, my eyelids haven't gone above like this level. That's how it is. It's this time of year. I mean, it's nonstop, and it's amazing, and we love it. But it means that our time in front of a computer editing videos is um, not what it was. So we'll get back on it. And also, just going to Mexico on a trip like this, it takes a lot of prep. And Jeff and I had a conversation right before we left. We were going to either rush out a video or wait. And with all the packing and stuff, and all of us just wanting to spend all the time with our families or something, we, it's like, you know what? We'll just put it. No one's going to die if we don't put out a video for a week and a half. Let's just come back happy and do it. Okay, I have a question I'm sure you have answered before, but I didn't catch it. Why do Mojave green rattlesnakes sometimes look greener than green and other times not? I grew up in Felon, California, in the desert, and I go to see Mojave greens, Diamondbacks, sidewinders, and stumble across them mountain or timber rattlers. Okay, so first I'm going to look at where that is. I'm not familiar with towns in California. Let me see where this is. So that'll help me kind of understand what kind of animals we're looking at. Okay, so first off, this is Damon's Deliberate Detour 492. There are no Western Diamondbacks there. So if you're in the forest near there can be red diamond rattlesnakes that can look like them. There can also be Southern Pacifics that people also often call Diamondbacks. But then in the lower area down where you're at, sidewinders and Mojave rattlesnakes. So first I can say Mojave rattlesnakes, there's no difference between a Mojave rattlesnake and a Mojave green rattlesnake. What you're asking about is why sometimes they're green and sometimes they're not. Why are they brown sometimes? Why are they just tan? The green color is not an indicator of the species. A lot of animals have variation in the colors that they will display. That has to do with genetics, location, vegetation, and geology of the area, and other factors. So in some areas, they can be more consistently green. So out in California, where you are at, they are more likely to be green. Some pretty green ones show up around here in Phoenix as well, but a lot of them are brown. A lot of them are tan. As you go further south and east in their range, they are more likely to be brown, and green ones show up less and less. So there's nothing special about Mojave rattlesnakes in their green coloration that is different than any other animal in its range of color that it can show off. I have hazel eyes. You might have blue eyes or brown eyes. Those are all things. So in some areas, more people might have one color of eyes. In other places, there's more variation to it. And it's just due to those genetic factors. But that is one of the things in Arizona that gets challenging, is that people believe that green color is diagnostic, that a Mojave rattlesnake and a Mojave green rattlesnake are different things. And a lot of times too, the Mojave rattlesnake, just because of its place in our culture, kind of overrides, a lot of further information. So it's either a Diamondback or it's some kind of Mojave, pink Mojave, a Mojave black, just different species. The important part is that's a Mojave. When really it's just that there's multiple species, and Mojave rattlesnakes have a pretty wide gamut of variation of color. So I hope that's actually an answer, because the answer is just kind of that sometimes they do, but they have in your area, they're more consistently green. Okay. Will I go herping with you? Sure. Shoot me a message. I can only disappoint you. We'll say that. Well, there's a lot of herping to do. I'm going out pretty often, so yeah, sure. Well, what we thought about doing, it would be great to meet some of you and get out into the field or something. So we've kind of been talking about come up with a some, not quite a bio blitz, nothing that's structured, but just something we're like, hey, we're going to go out to this area for a weekend and go herp. Whoever wants to show up, come on out and bring some camping gear and cheap beer, and we'll see what we can find. So more on that later. We just have to kind of get our stuff together. Can you tell us about rattlesnakes losing their fangs? Um, yeah, so the fangs break off pretty easily. They are a little hinge that swings forward. They have hinged fangs. They don't have fixed fangs, and they break off often. And usually there's another one growing right behind it. If you look at famously, if you look at old illustrations of rattlesnakes in Aztec art and sculptures, a lot of times there are double fangs back there, and that's just if you were to open up a rattlesnake's mouth, sometimes there's two fangs in there. Um, so that's part of the reason they're always so sharp, because the fang is always new. It also means that it can be dangerous to clean out rattlesnake enclosures sometimes, because I have been pricked in the thumb by a fang that has fallen off and went through the snake's digestive tract. And yes, you can be envenomated that way. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong. There was at least an envenomation, and I believe a fatality of somebody being envenomated by a shed cobra fang years back. So it's still, even then, even if it's not an envenomation, I don't want it. I don't want any holes in my hands when I'm dealing with rattlesnakes at all. Okay. Since urbanization has disrupted so much of the environment in the valley, and distinct rattlesnake species are frequently forced to share habitat due to encounter rattle intergrades in other areas where these intergrades are more frequently encountered. Yep, and I appreciate you not asking where those locations are, but what I can say is not really. So I think the best example of the way to describe this would be in my research in Phoenix parks over the last 7 years, where we have more or less completed an inventory on species diversity in each of the regions there. Sometimes contiguous, or once contiguous ranges that are now separated by neighborhoods, roads, and across demographic lines. Each of those little mini islands that is formed by those bits of urbanization have their own unique response to it. Different levels of ecological collapse, loss of diversity of species, not just reptiles, but notably plant life, saguaro missing, large trees, large old ironwood missing, increase of non-native grasses, and less native plant, and probably not necessarily as a result, but probably for the same reasons, less diversity of those other animals. So we're not seeing those animals inhabit new areas, just fewer of them, and they persist in surprising areas. But I can say that in one of those areas where it looks like tiger rattlesnakes have dwindled because it's a pretty small area, I have found with my partner in this, Richard Laguerre, a number of animals that look like they could be hybrids between tiger rattlesnakes and speckled rattlesnakes. So we need to confirm that. That's why I don't talk about it a whole lot other than around campfires. But that could be one indication like that, as you suspected, is once you get down to where you're in an area and you're one of 4 tiger rattlesnakes kicking around still, the speckled rattlesnake might start looking pretty good. Right, so there's probably some reasons for that, but we don't see any new distribution where there wasn't, only less. So hopefully that answers the question. And we get some really good compliments in here too. I really appreciate it. I'm not skipping over them and not reading them on here, and just trying to get through all the questions first. But yeah, I really am happy that people like what we're doing a lot. We certainly do. So the fact that people get something out of it is this added bonus to us. Would I speak to the size of rattlesnakes relative to habitat? When I live in the Gulf region of Texas in a tropical environment, Western Diamondbacks are pretty big, sometimes approaching 6 feet. We live in West Texas, in Midland, Odessa. Western Diamondbacks are seldom over 3 feet. Yeah, so there's a lot of factors here. Genetics playing a big part in that. So there's genetic potential. So when you're talking about Diamondbacks in particular, that's a really good example. So in South Texas, there's actually 3 clades of groups, lineages of Western Diamondbacks that were on their way to speciation, but they started interbreeding, and have gene flow over the north end of the Palencia Mountains and across the Continental Divide, which halted speciation. But it doesn't mean that they can't be pretty different. That's also why they look different. If somebody shows me a picture of a diamondback from Texas, it looks different than one from Arizona, or the central clade, which goes up right along the Continental Divide through the Chiricahua and Animas mountain range up into Grant County, New Mexico. They're more of a reddish color, interesting looking snakes. But so there's genetic potential there that has to do with just lineage, in addition to geology, geographic variance, and availability and size of prey. So I think availability and size of prey plays a really major factor in as well. But if we caught a baby Western Diamondback here in Phoenix and fed it as much food as it wanted, it doesn't mean we're going to make a 6-foot snake. We're going to still probably get the same 3.5-foot snake, just it might achieve it faster, or it's going to reach its genetic potential. Where in South Texas, there's a higher genetic potential for those snakes. And so, it could be just availability of prey. It could be there's just a lot more to eat. We see that size difference with other things too. I've noticed regional differences on a small scale with Arizona black rattlesnakes. It's something I've talked about a lot that I'm trying to look more into, is that the local Sonoran Desert variant that I look at a lot is a lower elevation, tends to be more nocturnal than other black rattlesnakes that I have seen, and it's much smaller, where you see adult males that are old individuals that are 2 feet long. I just don't see that in other places. So I think it's a matter of multiple factors, and I think being smaller can be an advantage. If you look at island dwarfism and gigantism, there are advantages to becoming big or small when you're in a smaller area or there are fewer of you. Being a smaller animal might help increase genetic diversity. It might be a way of countering genetic bottlenecks. Might be a way of preserving genetic diversity while working with a smaller area or smaller food sources, more competitive food sources, more niche differentiation with other similar species. Once those there's just a lot to it. So I would say, to answer your question, there's no one answer, but you're correct in noticing that, certainly. And I think it's really interesting. And I would say, if you want to learn more about the mechanisms behind those, looking at island dwarfism and island gigantism is an interesting way of looking at that. Notably on that, when we went to, with another group called Nova Inventa, I traveled to some islands off the coast of Baja, Mexico. And on one of these islands, there is a giant speckled rattlesnake, might be 5 feet long, speckled rattlesnake. And they were first on this island. So normally in the mainland there, on Baja, there's a large rattlesnake called a red diamond rattlesnake that gets about as big as a big diamondback, 4 feet long. And then there's small other ones, speckled rattlesnakes like we have here. But on this island, the speckled rattlesnakes were there first. They might have been there when the sea kind of rose around it. And they're just massive. They're just absolutely huge snakes. We've seen some there. Just incredible to see the normal speckled, but just as big as the biggest diamondback you've ever seen in your life. We didn't find any, but there are also red diamond rattlesnakes on that island, and they showed up later. So their size roles changed. On mainland Baja, red diamond rattlesnakes are large rattlesnakes that eat squirrels and large prey. And you have the smaller speckled rattlesnakes that eat smaller prey, lizards, and that kind of thing. On this island, because there was that open opportunity, speckled rattlesnakes are now the very large rattlesnakes on the island. And what happened to the red diamond rattlesnakes? They are mini. They're smaller. So it's really interesting, but just shows that genetic potential can change based on the environmental factors and the opportunities that are there. I think it's just super interesting. I'll probably talk about that a lot more without giving you an actual answer, but I think it's an interesting thing. Please, may you remind us on how you got into research. Um, so I would not recommend that anybody wants to study rattlesnakes or study anything does it the same way I did, because I certainly have uh, limited my ability, my reach by doing it this way. But I did not know that I could work in any kind of biology. It was not really presented to me as an option. So I just did like a lot of people do, where you just go herping and like animals, and just took it way too far. That's it. So there's if you're finding animals and taking notes, it's not that much further to take those notes and do something with them, or to make associations with agencies and uh, other places where you can like turn what you're doing into something else. And that, a lot of that stuff kind of came to me later in life, to where my hobby turned into something more. The research that we're doing in the Phoenix Preserve, and also everywhere else too. Like we've co-authored two publications that came out just in the last month on rattlesnake distribution and urban encounter, more human dimensions side of stuff. A lot of that just comes as a byproduct because we've amassed so much data um, doing the relocations. I mean, every time we go catch a snake at somebody's house, we have a point. We have an animal in a place and time and space that can be, later on attributed to all. Why is it here? What's its how do you avoid this? All that stuff. So when you look at it that way, is that alongside the work that we're doing, we're also amassing data, and that's useful to people. Then that is a natural bridge into getting a lot of this other stuff. So what I really am interested in, specialize in, is not just the relocation side, but the way that these animals live in these cities. Why are they where they are, and how does this whole thing work? I've been thankful to have a lot of good people that have helped me out and kind of turned. If I were doing it all over again, I'd probably go get my PhD in biology, and maybe be doing something else. But I do like where I'm at with this stuff, to where we can work on the projects we want. We're contributing to research. We are collecting data at a crazy rate. We are publishing. We are contributing to studies, and just the general knowledge of how this is. So if that's all this ever is for me, I'm happy with it. But that's it. It's just general interest in it, and the fact that, as soon as I understood that to do research and take part in science, it's certainly easier, and you have more doors open for you if you go, if you go a traditional route, but they're certainly not closed if you don't. And if you really want to work on it, then you can. So that's it. Just read every book, get too into it, spend way too much money on pit tags so your accountant yells at you, and then you're doing research. All right. All the best in Mexico. Can't wait to hear about the special species. Hope it's not too late to add 2 questions. Of course not. With a mother rattlesnake, maybe around 6 months after giving birth and babysitting, she runs into one of her offsprings. Would she recognize it? Yeah. Yep. Just look up social snakes. It's from the trying to remember what the website is. Let me see. Hold on. Okay. So if you want to learn more about that, just look up www.snakes.ngo. You will see the Advocates for Snake Preservation page, and Melissa has done a lot of work with social rattlesnakes there, particularly with Arizona black rattlesnakes. So I guess I should maybe temper my yes to it may depend on species, or maybe more variable in different species. But I would say that the more that is known about social lives of rattlesnakes, the trend is to be less and less surprised by complexity. So I would say, even if it hasn't been, there's not sufficient evidence for that, I would be surprised if it weren't the case, that there's much more under the hood of their social interactions than, oh, look, another snake. I think there's, especially when you have animals that live socially like that, you have a lot of animals that live and breed socially in groups with high site fidelity over and over again. You need to know who your dad is in those situations. So there's, and your brother, there's a lot of good reasons why uh, throughout your life it would be good for an animal to recognize their kin. Would leaving a light on in a crawl space or a strobe light help deter snakes from staying under the house? If we use mouse poison and the snakes eat the mouse, will the snake get sick? So first, a light in a crawl space, it might, and it might do it by deterring prey. Doesn't mean that it's deterrent, like they don't mind light. So I would say it's not going to bother them. It could have some effect, but I wouldn't count on it. Honestly, that would be an interesting experiment. Maybe when we're at some point here, we're going to be doing one with trying to find a deterrent. Maybe I'll add light to that list. The other question is, if we use mouse poison, a snake eats the mouse, will the snake get sick? Yes, the snake can die. So soapbox time. And I realize that pest control people will disagree with me about this, and that's okay. There's lots of good information about this. Their secondary death of predators and animals from rodenticides it's common, and it's a problem. It's not just death; it's other issues like mange, things like that are common from this. So there is this reverse outcome, unexpected, ironic outcome that comes from some pest control, to where I think if it were examined, the target pests that these things are trying to get rid of could actually end up being better off if certain things are used. So one of those is glue boards, right? So if you have glue boards in the garage and it catches, 3 scorpions in a month, great. There's 3 fewer scorpions, but a banded gecko that would eat 3 scorpions in a week is killed. A tiger whiptail that would kill 3 scorpions a night or a day, that's killed also. So you're killing the procedural, natural method of getting rid of things for a visible confirmation of something being done. Another thing with the poison is that in addition to killing rodents, you'd be killing snakes, gopher snakes, hen rattlesnakes, whatever else might eat that, birds of prey, hawks, bobcats, owls, coyotes, any of the other things that might come across that rodent could die from it. And if you also don't want to have snakes on your property, the things that are dying from that, it's not just snakes, it's the things that also eat snakes. So if you have rodents on the property and you're killing them with poison, you're essentially creating a big open predatorless opportunity for rodents that breed much more steadily, and for whom death is part of the reproductive strategy. It's just breed often and die fast. So it doesn't really work. And I can say that we have lots of properties that we have been doing property inspections at for more than several years. There's one that we've been going to for more than a decade, and very adamantly stuck on using poison, and there is no change in rodent population. They see a dead rat occasionally, but we find the dead bobcat in the bushes. We find the dead bird somewhere else. So I would say if you're using poison, please reconsider, because you're not helping yourself. You're not reducing rodents. You're killing everything else too. And I would look at, it's not about keeping rodents alive. Look at snap traps. Use snap traps, and just like rattlesnakes, focus on prevention. If you see a rodent hole in the ground, fill it with water and kick it in. Don't wonder what it is. Make life hard for them. You're always going to have rodents. Make them want to live 10 feet on the other side of the fence. So, okay, jumping off soapbox now. And again, pest control people will disagree with me on that, but it's okay. Have I had a chance to interact with my snakes in my new enclosure and learn some new exciting things? Oh, hey, Feld. When am I going to learn about snake behavior and inspire you to write a book and living with rattlesnakes? He's inside your enclosure every day. So Philip has a large rattlesnake enclosure outdoors. It's kind of like what I'm putting together that he's had for a long time, and we correspond about that here and there. So we have not put any rattlesnakes outside in our enclosure yet. The reason is to still have a lot of kind of terraforming to do. I have a lot of, I have like 60 tons of rock still to place in there. It's harder to work in there when I have rattlesnakes in there. So right now we have a couple of Gila monsters and some desert tortoises in there, a whole bunch of tadpoles, a gopher snake, a little pond, like where a couple of, 3 trees are planted. There will be rattlesnakes in it next year. This year and through the winter, we're still placing boulders and doing a lot of stuff. So the thing I'm looking for, and I do interact with rattlesnakes on the property every day anyway. Like if I walk outside my door and walk 100 feet down the road, I know where there's a diamondback or two or some speckles or something. So it's not going to be that much different than that. What I'm looking forward to is learning really specific things. Like if I know where the snakes are for sure, looking at things like barometric drop velocity, and to see at what velocity that movement might occur. Like really find things like that I can to work on. So my wife got me a weather station for Father's Day, and I'm having fun with that because it has an API, so I can do dumb stuff like that. Like every time I record an observation of a snake on my property, you can automatically pull those data and put it in there, and that's what I'll be doing with it. I'll be enjoying it, but I'm gonna be doing a lot of dumb nerdy shit too. But I'm terrified of night crawling, let alone a snake. Oh, night crawler. What says night crawling? I'm not sure what night crawling is, but that sounds terrifying to me. Also, I like night crawlers though, but night crawling, I will pass. Been a subscriber for 5 years, and I loved watching the channel grow. Thanks for all the education. Thank you for watching. My fiance and I plan to buy a home in Phoenix near a preserve and backing up to the desert. We understand these areas have a lot of wildlife, including snakes. Are there any specific areas with higher rattlesnake activity? Found a map on our website, wondering if it still holds true. How can we identify likely rattlesnake dens or areas in desert while house hunting? So one thing is you can contact me, send me an email with the property you're looking at. I'll tell you. For the most part, look at the age of the area, look at the size of the preserve you're backing up against and its nature. If it is one that has a large area, there's a lot of rocky habitat, you're more likely to have rattlesnakes there. If it's an older neighborhood, if there's lots of rattlesnakes there, you are less likely to encounter them still, because it reaches some kind of balance there to where the snakes are not, the element that brings us to Scottsdale and Peoria every day. I just looked on our Slack. Marissa's running a call to Scottsdale right now. Is that there's kind of this, this tumult on the edge of the city where increasing development and like nothing ever gets to settle down. Well, in the interior areas, if it's an old area, everyone kind of knows the score. The snakes know not to go to certain areas and vice versa. So there's a lot to do. But I would say if just send me an email. Email is Brian with a Y at rattlesnakesolutions.com. I'll take a look at it and tell you if it's a place that has lots of snakes or not. And even if there are, don't worry about it. I mean, there's lots of ways that can be dealt with. What is the gestational time for a rattlesnake? Do they have live birds, and what month is birthing season? So it can vary depending on species and location and all that, but a few months, 4 months, 3 months. A lot of the birthing takes place depending on when the monsoon rain comes. So first monsoon rain comes in, lots of extra moisture comes in, almost go into a shed cycle. After they shed, then they may give birth. Speckled rattlesnakes give birth much later in the year, but they also mate later in the year. Lots of rattlesnakes also mate in the fall and give birth the next summer. So they just retain sperm all winter and then become gravid in the spring and give birth the following fall. Some rattlesnakes, like Western Diamondbacks, mate in the fall and the spring. So there's not really one answer, but more or less it's the time that a snake would normally grow eggs and then lay them, and then those eggs to hatch, but all in one thing. Hey, Adam, thank you. I have no idea what that thing is you just sent. Oh, it's money. Sweet. Thank you. I will buy a mouse with that for one of the snakes. Appreciate that. That's awesome. I'm really bad at this live thing. I'm never going to get better at it either. I'm trying. Okay. Do any of our staff crew? Do we have any staff by quartzite? We've got a bunch of snakes moving through the RV parks, and for the most part, they just kill them over there. If there's one or more people over there that would be removals, that'd be awesome. We don't, but we should. And if we don't, I'd be happy to train somebody just so they can be that person over there. I think it'd be great. So I don't know if that's you. Let me know. But I think I was corresponding with somebody about that at some point here. It might have been you. So maybe I'll pick that up again. But yeah, quartzite has a lot of rattlesnakes. And all the rattlesnake rescues. Oh, there's a lot more comments. Oh, I guess they just keep coming if I scroll down. Okay. I might answer faster now. Let me go back up. I scrolled down a little bit and I saw the scroll thing was like halfway. I'm like, oh, there's not that many. But there's a lot because I saw it has like a lazy load method. Okay, so I'm just going to cruise through some of these. And now the rattlesnake rescues. Have you ever come across any crossbreed rattlesnakes? Nope. I answered that one earlier, but yeah, we haven't really run into any hybrids. It could happen someday, probably will. But what is the most potent venom, and what are the differences between the different species of rattlesnakes? So potency with people is hard to measure because, well, it's not a lot of, you can look at outcomes of bites. Volume, venom yield is a pretty big factor in there. So if you're not to say potent venom, but what bite results typically in the worst result, big snakes. So Eastern Diamondbacks, timber rattlesnakes, big Western Diamondbacks, those are probably going to be worst bites. If you're looking at a scale called LD50, which is how much venom is needed to kill 50% of mice that they are injected with, the lower that number is, the more toxic that venom is. I've seen that those numbers go different directions. Tiger rattlesnakes being usually the most potent, with Mojave rattlesnakes from some regions being others. So the variations between venom. So first I'll say it doesn't really matter that much. It does, clinically and just kind of interesting wise, but it's very complex, and it's not so simple as this rattlesnake has this type of venom and this kind of rattlesnake has this type of venom. There's a lot of different variation in venoms that even can change regionally. So like a Mojave rattlesnake from outside of Phoenix can have very different venom than one that's down near Tucson, or one from the Wickenburg area. And also different levels of things like a black-tailed rattlesnake or a speckled rattlesnake have neurotoxic components to their venom. Again, varying depending on different things. So think of the venom as kind of a cocktail of different ingredients in different amounts, and what, just like you can get a get a Bloody Mary at a restaurant and go to another place and get one. They're not going to be the same one, right? Same components roughly, but they're going to be very different. And one is going to be really good, and the other one is going to have worse outcome. So it's kind of like that. So worrying too much, if you're from a safety perspective, worrying about what type of snake has what venom or toxicity, focus on the size of the snake. That's a good rule of thumb. The other thing is that the discussion around it is kind of like, which bonfire is worse to be in? All of them. They're all a bad situation, but a really big bonfire is probably worse. It doesn't matter so much what the fuel is, get out of it. So for just trivia wise, I would say probably the tiger rattlesnake is the most toxic. How that relates to people, a Western Diamondback in Arizona anyway. When rattlesnakes are coming out of their dens, do they immediately mate or do they pair up with different mates that they had inside the dens? Both. Dens are large, complex social hubs where the snakes will continue to mate and fight and kind of jockey for position until they distribute for the spring, and then they do it again in the fall, and they'll find each other out in the desert and mate too. So um, I've seen some really experienced herpers talk about uh, dens and estivation dens as social hubs that the snakes are moving there to do those things, to shed and do different things. I disagree with that assessment. I think that the environment creates situations where lots of rattlesnakes happen to be together, or there's other factors that there's advantages to being together, and part of that togetherness is mating and other behaviors, and they'll certainly seek each other out in those areas and have complex relationships there. But the mating can happen anytime. It happens more at the dens because that's when everybody's all together, more or less. Clint from Clint's Reptiles says in one of his videos that venomous snakes probably aren't aware that they're venomous. He emphasizes probably. Then how do you explain dry bites? Aren't dry bites an effort to conserve venom? So I haven't seen that video. Someone told me about this before. I'm not necessarily sure I agree. I think it depends on how much, anthropomorphism is in his interpretation of the word probably, in awareness. Are they sitting around thinking like, hey, I'm venomous, I got a weapon? No. But is it something that the snake can consciously deploy or not? Yeah, it's evidence of that. I'm trying to think of an analogy that would make sense, but I'm sure they're aware of it in the sense that they are able to be aware. I guess like there's not going to be cognition like what we do, and do that. I think if we were trying to impose our version of aware onto a snake, then of course that's wrong. If that's the case, they're not aware of anything. But as far as the snake's awareness to itself and its situation and all that, then yes, of course, it understands the meanings, the abilities of its biology. So, again, I haven't seen that video, and whether or not I agree with Clint on that depends very much on his interpretation of the anthropomorphic side of that. Dry bites are not always to conserve venom too. In fact, I'm not even sure if there's a factor, like a figure that really shows why a lot of them occur. I think that a lot of them it's just a failure to inject. I mean, when I was bitten by a rattlesnake, I don't think it was a dry bite it was a conservation thing. I think it had to bite through some grass to get to me. I think that grass is loaded with venom and it just didn't get on me, or it got in. It wasn't a direct bite. Maybe there was a little bit left or something and it bled out, and who knows. But I don't know if venom expenditure is as directly related to decision making as we might think it is. And also, even if it is something that is informed by those senses, by the heat pits and all that, it might not be something that happens so fast that it might be something that's very highly automated, like spit, right? If I were to draw like a potentially wrong analogy here, you don't have to consciously salivate in order to eat, but you can consciously salivate if you want to. If someone said spit, you could do it. And you could do it better and more if you really thought about it, but you don't have to think about it to do it. I would say it's probably somewhere like that. Also, our snakes that are known for giving dry bites, like rattlesnakes or king cobras, smarter than snakes that typically don't. I'm thinking of mambas. They're often described as giving multiple bites and seemingly putting themselves at risk of exhausting their venom supply. I don't know that there is a difference. I don't know that there is. I think that anything that delivers venom has an ability to fail. As far as venom expenditure, uh, running out of venom isn't something that I think happens as much as we might. It's not as much of a concern. I have seen lots of rattlesnakes envenomate and kill prey, and then the next day are able to envenomate and kill prey. I think that that might be part of that factor, but I don't think that there's a lot of, they might. It's not quite regenerating. It's, one thing I've never seen is I've seen rattlesnakes that have no more venom. Uh, they're they're emaciated, they're dehydrated or something. Their venom glands are flat. Their head is shaped like a shoebox. Doesn't have that triangular shape. I've never seen a rattlesnake envenomate and then have a discernible change in head shape. So I'm not sure that um, depleting venom stores to the point that it's a concern is a thing. And I'm also not sure that different snakes. I think that the nature of the fangs and the bite itself might have more to do with that. Where a rattlesnake's bite, its strike is a lot. It's like an automated launch. They just go in a direction with fangs that are deployed, and they just hit it. Something like a rear-fanged colubrid or larger elapids like mambas or cobras. Um, their bite is just different. I mean, when I've worked with a cobra, and it's they just may be more or less prone to potential failure just by the way that they do it. So I don't think I gave you a great answer there, but I think that's probably it. Is that there isn't a great answer. I think there's a lot of factors there of why snakes give dry bites, and I don't think it's entirely well understood. What resources exist to help learn how to identify different species of snakes? First is find the best field guides in your area. Again, this is the one. It's not here for advertising purposes. I just have this because I have to use it every day. I have 3 copies of that book, actually, so I don't have to go to my other office to go get it because I use it so much. So if you're not sure, contact your local game and fish office and just ask what the most recent and accurate field guide is and get that. Also, join any groups you can on social media that might help you start learning to identify snakes. It can take a while. I'm trying to learn botany right now, and I'm terrible at it. But just find a way that you can kind of build exposure to it into your life. Depends on your study style too. But yeah, just there's lots of information, but social media is a really good way to do it. How do rattlesnakes and pack rats coexist? Do all snakes in the U.S. hibernate, and for how long? So rattlesnakes and pack rats just don't bother each other in nests. I saw a presentation at a conference out of Loma Linda years ago where they're looking at pack rats or wood rats having different levels of immunity to rattlesnake bites, and it wasn't really known why some are immune and some are not. And there was some ideas about potential other bites or exposure to proteins or whatever. We see that in Arizona here, to where pack rats and rattlesnakes just don't seem to mind each other at home. I've seen rattlesnakes sleeping side by side. I have video from camera traps of rattlesnake and a pack rat meeting each other nose to nose, and and there's a lot of advantages to both of them. I think that there's probably a symbiotic relationship there. But we also know that pack rats show up in stomach contents of rattlesnakes often. So it could be something as complex as that when they're home, they don't eat each other, but at different times than they do, or maybe just occasionally they do. Who knows? But I think that there's probably a lot there to learn. I think it's really interesting. And do all snakes in the U.S. hibernate, and for how long? Not really. So it depends on the I'd say 2 factors. Does the area freeze, and is there sufficient cover? Right. So the northern part of the United States, in Montana, or North South Dakota, the prairie rattlesnakes they accumulate in huge dens and they hibernate for a long time, just because they don't have any other option. And then the number of suitable sites that they can avoid freezing are fewer, so you're gonna have more animals in them. When you're down here in Phoenix, it's pretty easy to not freeze to death. You can take your pick of any rock pile and probably do okay. Desiccation is still your problem. But then if you go down to the southeastern United States, There are freezes that happen infrequently, but it's not really a thing. But you're also missing rock. You're missing large rock outcrops and the conductive permanence that exists in a in the mountain. So the snakes then spend a lot more time on the surface. In fact, I've seen, if you want to go see eastern diamondbacks on the surface, you go there in January because they kind of have to be. They don't have a lot of options. So I would say, in general, it's a pretty broad question if snakes do hibernate and for how long. I would say, it very much just depends on the climate and the availability of refugia. Those two things are going to affect how long snakes hide and and how they do that. I'm going to start working under my trailer in Kern County, California. I've had several different sizes of snakes and smelled the musty smell. I don't want to send my boys under there until I am sure that's safe. How do you start the process? This is something we have to deal with many times a year when air conditioning units start going out here. So I just got to check the weather to make sure I'm not about to drown in the storms I guess are coming. Okay, we're good. If you have skirting around the outside of the trailer, if there's any outside stuff, remove it first for a little while. Not only to see if there's stuff under there, is that you will remove the protective properties why animals are using it to begin with. So leave it open to the air, take away the thermal protection, take away the increase in humidity, and you'll not only see if there's snakes there or not, but you'll encourage snakes that are there to move along before you actually start working under there. Just make sure everybody has really good flashlights. It's hard underneath the house. I've done it lots of times. It's never fun, but just make sure that you don't, that you can see where you're going. But that's the top thing I would say is remove those skirts if you can. My neighbors have seen rattlesnakes on their properties. I live in Chino Valley, Arizona, north of Prescott, and I understand rattlesnakes are territorial and do not wander off more than a half mile from the den. Is this true? No. I have 2 small dogs and I have chain link fence surrounding my property with plastic slats. I'm always worried about rattlesnakes. I have seen other snakes on my property, no rattlesnakes yet. I live in a rural area with open fields. Okay, so first, you do have rattlesnakes. And if you live in that area and you have rural property with open fields, there are rattlesnakes and they are visiting. They're just good at avoiding you, which is what they're very good at that. So as far as territorial, it's a loaded word that I've seen used lots of different ways. And the reason why it can kind of cause some confusion is because it'll be accurately used once, but then it gets transferred to a lot of other applications where it's no longer true. So rattlesnakes are territorial in exactly the same way that we are territorial, meaning that their home range is not an arbitrary distance around a central point. It is a nebulous shape built of around very particular points of success and failure. And the size of that home range depends on the frequency and availability of those points. So where you live in Chino Valley in a rural area, you probably have to drive further to a grocery store than somebody that lives in downtown Prescott, meaning that your home range has less available microhabitat, less available important features, places of success. So your home range is larger, your territory is larger. If you think about the places that are your home range is your house. Maybe some friends and family live in the area. The grocery store you go to, there's a restaurant or two you like. Maybe there's a bar you like to go to on Friday, and then there's a movie theater somewhere that you go to. Draw a shape around that. That's your home range. In the distances and tolerances and willingness you have to visit any of those areas, along with the routes that you take to go to those areas, are going to change dramatically based on how good those places are and how often you need to use them. That kind of thing. Snakes are the same way. They might spend the winter in a rocky area somewhere, but there's the best hunting a mile away in one direction. So they'll go there in the spring. Whether or not they go overland right through your property or down through a drainage might have to do with the available cover, temperatures in the area, predators, all kinds of different stuff. So think of it that way. It's complex. It's based on the number of features there. If you have more useful features on your property, you're going to probably be incorporated in more home ranges than others. So if your property is just open grassland and there's no rock at all, there's no drainages going through there, your home is sealed and there's no way to get under it, you don't, all that stuff, you're going to have fewer rattlesnakes because it's just part of the interior of the home range, not a destination. If you've seen snakes on other properties, there's snakes there. So I would say if you aren't seeing many there, you don't have to worry about it too much unless you just move there and just kind of like, getting the lay of the land. But I would expect to see some here and there, primarily in your area. Depending on where exactly you are, you have Mojave rattlesnakes, Arizona black rattlesnakes, and blacktails nearby. Do you ever get calls and surprise? I don't think I've ever seen any videos with relocations over there. Yep, every day. Not as much as some other. There's fewer areas just because a lot of it's developed or it's been enveloped by Peoria as far as its contact with native areas. But way out towards where Bell Road is, yeah, we get sidewinders out there and stuff. Okay, I am the man that identified a crotalus years back. My Colorado desert shovelnose snakes are doing well in captivity. Great. My question is this: based on my king snakes activity, do any of my snakes exhibit a got mouse activity? I'm not quite sure what that means. Does that mean like they get it and they end zone dance, or like do something that I'm not quite sure what that means? So if you want to message me or email or something, I'll get you a good answer. What do you suggest for deaf people that live near or hike rattlesnake territory or other venomous snakes? That's a good question. I wish I had a better answer for. Still, even though snakes rattle, your eyes are still the best tool for avoiding rattlesnakes. When I'm out in the field, the times that I have almost stepped on a rattlesnake or have stepped on rattlesnakes, the rattling would not have stopped that. It's that I see them. So I would say continue to focus more so on that. There's another thing that I want to try to see if I can do. It's a feature on iPhones. I'm not sure if Androids do it as well, but there's sound recognition that can detect things like a crying baby or a dog barking, and I think there's some level of customization there. I might see if that's something that I'm going to actually make a note of that, because I think that would be a really interesting thing to see about the possibility of having sound recognition of a rattlesnake rattle that can be built into something like that. Because if that could happen, then there could be workflows or even apps that could be developed that could hear a rattlesnake rattle for you and then just enter whatever notification or workflow. Yeah, I'm going to send off some annoying emails about that. See what happens. But I would say, yeah, the easy answer, which is not the best, is just continue to very carefully look where you're going. And just to say too, I'm not aware of any death bite victims that were a result of that. So it's just one of many things. Just be aware of your surroundings. Is it safe to go night hiking? I'd love to go up to the Phoenix Mountain Preserve at night, but I'm worried about coming across snakes I won't see. You will run into snakes at night. You will. Also, just check the laws. Phoenix Mountain Preserve. There's places you can, like, if you wanted to go night hike there, go up to the top of Piastra where everyone else does, because there's going to be fewer rattlesnakes that are going to be, stay on the trail, that kind of thing. But yes, you will see snakes. As for ride-alongs, we cannot, unfortunately. We get a lot of requests for that, but as you can imagine, insurance and us are, we like them maybe more than they like us. But yeah, we can only bring employees along on calls, unfortunately. Can any rattlesnake most likely breed with rattlesnake of other breeds? Are there any rattlesnakes sufficiently different from other rattlesnakes that they cannot produce a viable offspring between them? Are there any rattlesnake mules? So yeah, rattlesnakes do hybridize from time to time. They largely avoid it, but there are naturally occurring hybrids. It's not super common. Whether or not they can breed, I'm not really sure, but there are populations for sure that they do breed, like the prairie and Mojave rattlesnake hybrids that are along the Continental Divide. I part of the reason maybe why I don't know a tremendous amount about hybridization is I think that the majority of that information is in intentional hybridization driven by the pet trade, which have, I think there's ethical problems there, and I haven't really dived in more than to like look at a picture here and there. I do know that there was a wild rattlesnake and I believe copperhead hybrid that was found. In which case, that animal would not be able to breed, almost certainly, because one gives live birth and one lays eggs. As far as rattlesnakes go, I think that they would all probably be viable, with the exception possibly of Cistrurus genus, which is the pygmy rattlesnakes and Massasaugas. They might have enough differences that would make it impossible, but you know, I think that they're close enough that most of them can hybridize and produce offspring, but there's definitely some differences that could cause that. Do the employees who agree to be filmed on the channel earn more for participating? Yes. Are there other employees who run calls that don't show up on the channel? Most of them. Whose idea is to make a YouTube channel, and where they get the inspiration? Do you ever think it would be this big or popular? So yeah, there's we have certain people that participate in it. It's not that we don't like the other people that work with us. We have a lot of really awesome people on there. So first, when we first started kind of deciding who we were going to have on the channel, it just comes down to availability. So Marissa and Nick, and myself and Jeff kind of consider ourselves that we're on this full time, which means that we can spend the money on getting the camera equipment and workflows and stuff to where we can do this. It would be very hard to do it. You know, we have about 20 people that run calls, more or less, depending on between here and Tucson. It'd be very hard to maintain that across the whole thing, where everybody has a camera, everybody's participating, everybody's kind of, there's a particular way that we want to say things. There's a particular way that we want to show things. It makes it a harder task. Also, just from kind of a storytelling perspective and a content perspective, by now you probably have noticed tendencies and preferences and stuff between us. We very much do not. This is not a channel about snakes. This is a channel about our lives working with these animals and all that. And that's harder to tell if you have 15 or 20 people randomly coming and going. I think, and we all think, it's better to have fewer people that you get to know more. And also we just kind of try to differentiate a little bit too. Like we all know that Nick and Jeff and Bryce get mixed up all the time when people are talking about them, because it's not that they look similar, but you just have a can of 20 something white guys and everybody we all end up looking the same. So we try to keep that in there. We are going to be introducing some new people. Bryce is relatively new. We're going to be bringing in another Nick from Tucson. So we're going to have a standard Tucson presence that's down there once we get that all set up. So there's a lot. The idea to make this, we've had a YouTube for a long time. I just kind of use it to make little one-off educational videos. I never really focused on it. Jeff is the one that brought it up a few years ago, maybe a month before you saw our first video under the rebranding, correctly thinking that we would have a lot of content if we sorted out a way to kind of, it's the time to edit and produce and come up with consistency. That's the hard thing. So we did think it would become popular. I think that there's still a lot more to go. It's not that I'm not happy with how things are. I think it's great. I think that the thing that we're trying to kind of break through is that I think that when we look at the analytics on videos that we think are successful, it's not just that they were viewed a lot. We look at where people came from, and we're trying to kind of get into spaces that are not wildlife centric, to get into other kind of like strange job type categories or interesting life type categories, or just we know that when we're looking at the individuals that have really large YouTube channels based around snakes or venomous snakes in particular, um, it's a little bit more like jackass than we prefer. Because you're not ever going to see us taking risks, free handling, using the animals for stunts, or anything like that. It's a lot more based on science, and you know what you're watching. So I think that we're really happy with the growth we've had. I think that we're still working towards. We're still kind of at the beginning of it. I hope, because that's what we're trying to kind of crack, is to get around. We're not trying to make like a reality TV show. We are trying to show something that we think is interesting and you can learn on the side. And people are always interested in, like, look at the questions that were asked here. Half of them are about snakes, but half of them are about just the fact that this is a thing that exists. I think that that's probably the interesting thing. And I think that's the thing that, made things kind of different. There's a lot of snake channels. I think that that's where we have a lot of growth to do. So, yeah, just starting. Do we train people who are interested in doing this in our area? We don't. I personally, and this is tricky because it's not gatekeeping. It's really not. The fact is, it's a very complex task. I think what Phoenix Herpetological Sanctuary does is great, because they teach people in their home, at their home. You find a snake at your property, to capture a snake, to move it to the edge of your property and let it go. I think if that jumps to, okay, I learned how to put a snake in a bucket, I'm going to offer this to my community as a service, I think that's where you start getting into problems. It's not that I don't think that it's great that that will is there. It's just that it's very complicated. Meaning, once the snake is in the bucket, that's really when things start. That's when the work really starts. And if I have a sidewinder in a bucket, I better know everything about where sidewinders live, what their habits are, to determine where I'm going to put the thing. I need to have experience, or have availability of the experience of how to make it so it's not going to be a problem for somebody else. And that's going to change whether it's spring or winter or the middle of the summer. There's a lot of natural history that's involved in that is just not part of that training. It's not that we couldn't offer that training. It's just not something that then would be, again, putting a snake in a bucket, that's easy. Learning enough about the animals to do the job properly in a vacuum, that would be a very difficult thing to teach. So we don't. I think that more and more I would prefer to see. So again, I'm happy that there's so much will and that people are taking it upon themselves to do. But I also see that, especially when we are able to finish what we're working on and publish on microhabitat usage and effective long distance translocations and that kind of thing, it's going to start resembling more and more of a complex job of wildlife biology, rather than saving a snake or something like that. So not to discourage you, I'm just saying that's the reason that we don't train on it, is because I think it's pretty complex. So we train the people that work for us, but they also have access to all the information and all that, and it takes a couple of years to really get those paces down. So between all the rattlesnakes in the U.S., Mexico, and Central America, who has the most venomous rattlesnake of them all? I'm not sure which country it would be, but the neotropical rattlesnakes are probably not as much known about it. Very, very large snakes, heavy neurotoxic components, doesn't work with crowfab, questionable about whether it works really well with Anavip, and results all over the place that are, I guess, too noisy to tell if it's the snake or the availability of treatment and other things, but a lot more deaths occur. So I would say, just knowing that it's not entirely understood, Um, the snake that I would least like to be bitten by would be one of the large neotropical complex animals in South Central America. Uh, those would be not good. um, a Simus, something like that, Durissus, Terrificus, any of those. So yesterday, a lady at work said she heard a rattlesnake in late afternoon in mid-Phoenix. My guess is she heard a plastic bag being blown in a heavy wind. But what kind of rattlesnakes would one find around the 51 in Indian School at 4 p.m. pre-monsoon, but it's still 110 outside? I think you probably nailed it with plastic bag. Or, surprisingly, cicada. Cicadas don't sound like rattlesnakes, but when the majority of a lot of people's experience with what rattlesnakes actually sound like is what they sound like on TV or movies, cicadas fool a lot of people. In fact, we do get a lot of calls every year for, cicadas. Or people will describe they came to visit Phoenix and there were so many rattlesnakes they heard them singing in the trees. Like the rattlesnakes are just hanging out rattling all the time. So I would say it might have been probably a cicada she heard, or something else like that, or a sprinkler. Who knows? How painful is a rattlesnake bite itself? I am very happy to say I have no idea, but I've heard descriptions like putting your hand in molten metal, all kinds of stuff like that. Probably unbearably painful. My one bite was a dry bite, so hoping that's it, but probably more painful than you think it is. My question is more angled towards the business of rattlesnake catching. Are there laws and regulations? Is there licensing, inspection standards, and how do they vary by state? It's a great question, and it kind of goes back to the one about training before. So yes, the laws and regulations and everything are going to vary quite a bit based on the state and area. But in Arizona, in order to offer the service to the community legally, you need to have something called a wildlife services permit administered by the Arizona Game and Fish Department, which requires, in addition to experience and other stuff, a minimum of 6 months professional experience to obtain that license. And then there are a lot of stipulations about how the work needs to be done within those. So we adhere to all those stipulations. And then on top of that, we have our own much more strict rules about how we operate. There are no inspections, but they do inspect the data sheets that we have at the end of the year. And I'm sure if we were out of line, I would hope anyway that there would be something on that side that would correct that. There are also other things that are considerations depending on where we are. We might have other different types of licenses to do the research we're doing. I have a scientific activity permit, again, from Game and Fish, and also to keep these rattlesnakes for the purposes that we do. I have wildlife holding permits, also by Game and Fish, along with multiple different types of insurance and contractor's license for some of the other work that we do. Each state and region is going to have different things. Each region in Game and Fish has different things. And also each individual within our company has to have their own individual license. There's no business license. So the short answer is there's a lot of paperwork that goes on with doing this. And that's all part of why it's hard to do. We certainly hold ourselves to a pretty high standard with that stuff too. Honestly, I think that's one of the things we're working towards is that I think some of the stipulations that are allowed for wildlife services are too general, not specific enough to actually do the job appropriately. That's why you hear things like relocation is a death sentence, because it's not very usually performed with specificity. Has a caller, upon learning a snake is harmless, elected to have the snake left in place? Yes, often. And that's the desired outcome. More often than you would know. That's the case. Most of the time, too, if that's going to happen, we're able to just talk them out of it on the phone. If someone calls and says they have a gopher snake in their property, we're not just going to go run out there and get the snake. We'll say, well, you don't need us to know this stuff. But we also know that the snake doesn't often live if we refuse on principle. So if we offer it and say, we know that person knows that it is not a harmful snake, but they still want us to come out there, we come out there. Do we ever have close calls with resident rattlesnakes when hiking to release? Yep. But thankfully, we're always looking for snakes, so I wouldn't really be close calls. It's just kind of, I guess, the closest call that I've had was one. If you look back on our channel, my bite was a second snake that was there at the point of release, which I was not expecting because it was like, middle of the night on a cold night in November. So, if anything, we're excited when we see another snake, not just because we are happy to see snakes, but because it means that we are correct in our assessment of where snakes live in the area and where we're releasing them. Do we maintain maps or data about release areas? As far as release points, we don't, because we do not want to establish drop-off points. Doesn't mean we'll avoid those places if it's the right place for that snake. Meaning, every time if we catch a snake at somebody's house, the reason why that snake is there, the time of year, its condition, all those things are important, and those are all going to determine. So there's, just because it's like we won't take a snake and release it into a big exposed rocky outcrop in June, even if it's perfect habitat for snakes. It's the wrong habitat for that snake in June. But in the winter, sure, we'll be looking for those things. So it's just not that simple enough to where we can boil it down to specific points. Also, each situation is unique, and the place that we choose for releases also needs to be unique. That's how we avoid things like overpopulating a certain area, causing other problems. Problems that we see fire departments primarily cause. A handful of pest control operators and security teams do this as well, where they have designated drop-off points. They just go drop off all the snakes in one area, and it's a tremendous disservice to the neighborhood and the animals. So that's how we avoid it. Is every single time we catch a snake, our maps come out. We decide again where they go. Do rattlesnakes strike when they are suddenly startled? Often they do. That's one of the things, is that you can't rely on a rattlesnake to rattle before it strikes. A lot of times they will just strike, but then again, you can also just step on one sometimes and they don't. If you're just walking past one, you're not likely to startle it to the point of biting. It's most likely going to just sit there and remain hidden. So just keep your eyes open. That's the best thing. Is there an easy way to tell a male from a female snake? It's not really easy, but you can tell. And I can tell more or less every time. The way I can tell that is I check. So there's a period of time where we were checking to see how often we were right, and I was right every time. Female rattlesnakes have a noticeably different body. If you look it up on our channel, just do a search on it, you'll see it explained with some diagrams. But females generally have a wider body that graduals or tapers abruptly before the cloaca, with a smaller tail than the cloaca. The male's body gradually tapers, and then at the cloaca, the tail is as thick or even thicker a little bit than the body, or than the body at cloaca, and longer. So it's hard to tell a lot of times what a tail is in an animal that looks like it's all tail, but if you look at quite a few, you'll be able to tell. Are snakes active when it's 110 and above, and are they out at night or stayed in their dens? So they can't be out at those times. So air temperature can kill them at that point. They start dying, exposure over 105, really. So they're hidden away a lot of those times. You can still find them, but you have to find them down in the ground where they're at. And there's places that you can do that. During those times, they're either going to be not active if there's no moisture, or active at night, or active at night near their dens. So, for instance, I went out looking for estivating snakes the other night with some friends from Florida. We found them predictably within 40 feet of their estivation den, out hunting, hoping for rain, which they got. But also, they're pretty much tethered to those estivation dens, just like you might have heard us use that word in the winter. As they're leaving their winter dens, they're tethered to those dens too, where they still want to go out and do things, but they must return because they need that. What are they going to do in the daytime when it's 110? That's why when the monsoon develops later in springtime, part of the reason that people run into rattlesnakes more is because those tethers don't exist. When it's daytime highs of 90 degrees, the snake has a lot of places it can avoid. So they're more distributed. We're going down to work on South American rattlesnakes. Not anytime soon. I've never seen a rattlesnake in South America. I'd like to. I think it's in my plans. Not answering questions about personal lives. If we learn to see a rattlesnake, they can be communal. Can be various species of rattlesnake can various species of rattlesnake live together? I've seen our team put in a bucket 2 different species in a short period of time in the wild. Do they live in the same den? Yep. A good spot is a good spot. You know, they may interact, and again, I will disagree with assessment from some that think a lot of this is intentional, but yes, you can find multiple species of rattlesnakes using the same dens in the winter and in the summer, and they get along just fine. Doesn't mean that they like each other. It could mean they tolerate each other. Doesn't mean they don't like each other. It's like if an alien came down here and went to a quick trip in the morning, they would think that is the most. They would think it's a temple. They would think it's the most important thing in the world. All these people are going here, nobody talking to each other, busy with our tasks. Doesn't mean we're all friends. Everybody in that quick trip at 7 o'clock in the morning getting some roller food they probably shouldn't be eating and some coffee. Doesn't mean we don't like each other. We're all just there because there's something there we need. And it doesn't mean we live in the same place or we have the same interests. It's kind of like that. Have I found a rattlesnake in a territory that they aren't supposed to be in? Yep. So that timber rattlesnake I referenced earlier, but also just locally, occasionally we get a speckled rattlesnake in the middle of town. We find Diamondbacks just in the middle of the city. Sometimes they hitch rides on cars. Sometimes they fall into the canal and float around. There's lots of different things that can happen where snakes get transported. A notable one is probably once a year we get a call just at places where street sweepers are at the hub of those, because they just sweep up a rattlesnake cleaning and bring it back, and it's just suddenly crawling around central Phoenix. So it happens. Does a rattlesnake like to eat Skittles? No. Does your favorite snake? What is your favorite snake? Period. Arizona or not? I cannot give you an answer. It changes depending on what I'm looking at. Whatever snake I'm looking at, that's my favorite snake. I know that's kind of a non-answer, but it is the answer. I could sit here and think about what's my favorite snake forever. I think if I really, really were to pick one for bringing more logical reasons, Western Diamondback is probably my favorite snake. I see lots of them, but for me, rarity does not equal cool. Scarcity doesn't equal cool. I think for me, the Western Diamondback is one that it's easily observed. I spend the most time with it. It's the thing that dictates my living. I pay for my house based on the activity and behavior of a Western Diamondback. So that's why I have 8 trucks on my forearm. That's probably it. But I like all of them. What do I think about snake gators? They're worth the money. Yeah, if you're gonna, they're cactus proof too. They're great. I wear them a lot of times when I'm in different situations. Yeah, they can definitely work. Get some that are comfortable. I use turtle skins for that reason. They have a good zipper. Will I be looking for a Santa Catalina rattlesnake? I will at some point. Need a permit to do it now in Arizona. I've been to other Mexican islands, but have not been to that one. I will at some point. Hey, if we're headed to Mexico, could you try to find Eric Smith eye? I'm not. The reason for that is that I have a young kid. In my time of risking death to find snakes that I just want to see is over. So maybe at some point, but I have to come home to my little girl. So looking for rattlesnakes on the edge of poppy fields in Central America is not it. So maybe someday it'd be cool if things change, but currently not gonna make plans to do so. Do the snake's tongs hurt the snakes? They do not if they're used properly. This is a big misconception. And people also ask, why do you use hooks sometimes and tongs and others? There's no one tool for the job. Sometimes you need one hook. Sometimes you need 2 hooks. Sometimes you need tong and hook. Sometimes tongs are fine. Depends on the situation and what you're doing. In our situation where we must catch the snake, we must succeed and not drop it, and we have to do it quickly and efficiently and safely. For us, tongs are the answer to that. And when they're used properly, meaning that they're used with the right amount of force, they do not injure the animal. It's not as simple. I have watched people drop snakes off of hooks multiple times now, and the snake dies So using a hook is not a guarantee of success in life of the snake. It's about picking the right tools. So that's why you see us often using tongs to catch the snake, but then using a hook to release it. Or in our snake room here, I use one hook, or mostly I use two. So yeah, properly used snake tongs do not hurt the snake. Just like any tool, any improperly used tools can easily hurt the snake. A rattlesnake deterred by fake grass or fake turf? Yes, but because it's hot as hell. That's it. Fake grass, fake turf. I understand its reasoning, but man, it's hot. It's hotter than pavement. It's very hot. That's my main concern, is that as we're dealing with the effects of ecological collapse due to heat island effect in the middle of the city. Any surface, including concrete, is better than fake grass as far as generation of heat. So that would be the reason why I would deter rattlesnakes. Is just it's useless. They can't get water from it, and it's really hot. So kind of, but it deters me too. Deters anything that has skin, I think. Where are pygmy rattlesnakes in Florida? They are in Florida. I'm not sure exactly. There might be some places where they're not, but as far as I know, pygmy rattlesnakes are ranged throughout the state of Florida. Just the dusky pygmy rattlesnake. I know there are 17 or 18 species of rattlesnake in Arizona. Can I name most of them, and what are the areas or habitats that they most frequent? Okay, let me try to answer this as briefly as I can, because it's a lot. I'm gonna list all the rattlesnakes from north to south. So along the Arizona Strip, you have Great Basin rattlesnakes, Grand Canyon rattlesnakes, and midget-faded rattlesnakes. But then on the far ends, on the east side, you have prairie rattlesnakes. But then you run into some Sonoran Desert or Mojave Desert on the far northwest end, where there will be black-tailed rattlesnakes, speckled rattlesnakes, and Mojave rattlesnakes, and sidewinders that go up into Utah. So then once you get down below the rim or to the rim, you have Arizona black rattlesnakes. Then you get to the Sonoran Desert areas. So you add tiger rattlesnakes, western diamondback rattlesnakes. God, I'm going to screw this up at some point. Where I listed the other ones are there, but along with the other two subspecies of sidewinders. So in addition to the Sonoran Desert sidewinder, Mojave Desert sidewinder, and Colorado Desert sidewinder. And then further south, you start getting into the montane species of banded rock rattlesnakes, twin-spotted rattlesnakes, ridge-nosed rattlesnakes, twin-spotted. I said twin-spotted, but Massasaugas, desert Massasaugas are there also. I feel like I probably missed one or two. But that's it. Is that when there's 4 deserts in Arizona, and that's the way that you can really look at it. Is each of those desert zones are going to have different variety. So if you have Chihuahuan Desert, you're going to have Chihuahuan Desert species, prairie rattlesnakes, kind of thing. Sonoran Desert, you have Sonoran Desert species. So that's part of the reason we have so many here. So that could be its own thing, but I would say if you're really curious about it, get the Snakes of Arizona book. It has a really good detail. Please be Crotalus transversus. I wish. I've gone looking for transversus 2 times. I have not seen it in either of those times. I will go back at some point and get it. But my 6-year-old daughter wants to know how bad it hurts to be bit by a gopher snake. It doesn't hurt all that bad, but I would avoid it. It's a bunch of little cuts. It's like getting scratched by like a really bad, like a pokey bush, and it bleeds. So I avoid it always. Another channel made the statement that envenomation of an adult human by a rattlesnake requires that the person receive antivenom, most times multiple doses. Is this true? Or is it possible to ride out a bite? It is possible to ride out a bite. It's not smart. The reason is not just because it's not a Boolean, it's not just lethal or not. Venom in your system can cause a lot of damage to organs, to the limb itself. So yeah, there are lots of people that just get bit and write it out. A lot of people doing illegal things that don't want people to know what they're doing, just write it out. I would always give antivenom. I know it's expensive, but that's the thing, is that if I'm bitten on the hand by a rattlesnake, I want to have that hand. I want to have functionality in that hand. I don't want to risk damage to organs. I don't want to risk it. In the United States, there are two types of anti-venom that are easily available everywhere. So it's not so much a question of if somebody could write it out if they're bitten, but why the hell would somebody write it out when there's treatment for it? And if somebody has something going on that would prevent them from wanting to uh, be known that they were bitten by a rattlesnake to the point that they would risk their life and health to avoid getting antivenom, there's different questions to be asked about what's going on with that person. But so yes, you can survive it, but your chances of survival go much, way higher if you have antivenom, and there's no reason not to, really. Why are snakes from other areas much larger? I think I talked about that a bit, but a lot of it has to do with genetic potential, the area that they're in, prey availability, size of prey, lots and lots of factors. But really, it's has to do with many factors. So I guess look back at the question that was asked about Western Diamondback differentiation in Southeast Texas compared to here. And I think this is the last question in this list. Then I'll check the chat, but then I got to get out of here. I'm glad I have many first world problems. Me too. Like being too busy with work. I like it. It's fun work. We can sleep in the winter. A professor of mine once said that the only stupid question is one that's never asked. I agree. My question will challenge that notion. Here it is. As rattlesnakes possess heat-seeking pits, if you dropped a cup of warm pudding on either one or near the snake, would it strike at the pudding? It might, but available research says that it wouldn't do so necessarily at a higher frequency than cold pudding. It would be because the pudding dropped next to them. So that could be tested in a number of ways. But again, both instances that I have found of testing of likelihood to bite, not accuracy, but likelihood to bite based on the temperature of a defensive bite in a defensive situation says that there would not be a meaningful difference between those two things. I'm sure there's some other things there. If you had that pudding and it smelled like a mouse and it was a predatory bite, that might change things. If you were measuring per bite how often they connected, that would change things potentially. But the most simple answer is that nope. All right, that is the last of those. I'm just going to go through these comments really fast here and see if there's anything. I'm not getting them all, I know. But I also need to go and help feed my kid. I've been doing this a long time, and I know that storm is coming at some point. It's been interesting watching. There's so much bad information about weather out there. Okay. I just noticed the temperature in here just drop about 10 degrees too, so something's up out there. Yeah, Stephen, we'll talk about the Hibernaculum project. We should have done it when we were in Mexico, but we were all busy talking about other dumb things. I know I'm missing a bunch of stuff. We'll do some more of these, though, I bet. We need an updated reptile room tour. Yeah, definitely. Right now, it's kind of there's camping equipment all over the floor and stuff, but definitely I want to do something that's more in depth. I think I'll get Jeff up here and we'll do it together. If left undisturbed by urban housing, other development, how long do rattlesnakes typically live? There's not really any particular answer to that, but I would say, like, if we see an old rattlesnake that's 15 or 20 years old, we consider that to be an old snake. Wildlife doesn't die peacefully in bed someday. It gets eaten by something or it fails. Just like our lives are probably twice as long as they would be otherwise. Snakes in captivity don't always necessarily live longer lives too, because they're subject to things like mistakes with husbandry, or the air conditioning going out, or a fire, or problems, or viruses coming into the collection from poor quarantine, all kinds of stuff. So I think they could probably be, they can live into their 50s, but usually they just don't. So I'd say if you see a snake that's 20, that's old. Can we explain the differences between neurotoxins and hemotoxins? As far as outcomes, there's a lot of things there, but basically neurotoxins attack the nervous system, functionality in the nervous system, and hemotoxins, cytotoxins, and myotoxins, stuff like that that affect tissues. They take blood or cells or any number of those things. So when we're talking about a snake that's hemotoxic, we're really talking about snakes that have a combination of cytotoxic and myotoxic effects. But I'm certainly no expert in venom. These are just so if I could have said any of that incorrectly. So be ready for that. Mojaves here in West Texas are brown. Yep, they are. Most of them are. I appreciate all the positive comments, everybody. I'm not reading them. I'm reading them. I'm just looking for questions, just so I can make sure I address everything I can. I think if you haven't asked a question yet, maybe hold off, just so I can try to taper this a little bit. I saw at Walmart a device that takes care of bee stings and snake bites. It does not. I wish they didn't sell it. It's crazy to me that it does. There's been plenty of research that says that it does not help or makes it worse. But Walmart and REI still sell it. Bizarre. How long do rattlesnakes stay active in Phoenix, and what time of year do they usually head to hibernation spots? I feel they may be more active a little longer here due to the warmer temperatures. That's correct. Typically, we start seeing den ingress starting around the third week of October, tapering off to what we'd call more or less completion within the second week of November. That's with Diamondbacks, but it seems to hold across everything else that's in our observations, in our surveys, and also replicated on the hotline. So that's more or less it. Do we have a crew in Tucson? Yep, we got a very active crew in Tucson. Do snake eaters really help? They can, yeah. If venom gets into clothes from a failed strike, like loose clothing or hiking, is there something that can neutralize the spilled venom for safety? It's a protein, so just wash it off with soap. Don't touch it. I mean, it's not, if it's on your skin, it's not going to envenomate you either. You just don't want it around. So just wash it off with soap and hot water, like anything else. Just it'll fall apart on its own. When we get venom on my hat, I use just dish soap and water and just spray it off of there. Yeah, the questions I was asking are not from the chat. They were from the video from before we left saying, leave all your questions here. So if anyone's wondering what those questions were, that's where they were. Croat alert. I like it. I'm going to see if that's possible. I hear that storm outside, so my time is going to be coming to a close here, whether I like it or not. We're on DSL out here in the middle of nowhere, so as soon as storms come, we just, it just stops. The people respect for, I appreciate it. You mentioned only getting bitten once, but how often do bites happen on the job other than bite-related injuries that are common? I will do a air knock on wood here, but I am the only person on our team that has been bitten by a rattlesnake at work. We prioritize safety. Again, that's why we're never going to have a channel that's as popular as some of these other ones where they do dumb things. But we're going to be doing this a lot longer because we don't do dumb things. So thankfully, it's very not a common thing. Do the free removal services do the same thing as that we do, or is it different? Are there lots of free removal people? There are lots of free removal people in the area. It's hard to answer this. Again, this is not a gatekeeping thing. I think that free removal, there's a lot more options for snake removal than there has ever been, which is a good thing. I also think that the way that it's done across the board has never been worse, because I think that the excitement of it, of just putting a snake in a bucket and taking it somewhere, is preventing the depth that's required to do it properly. So I think that it's going to improve, but I can't say that the majority of the free room, and being free doesn't matter. I would say being new to it. Not that there shouldn't be new people, and obviously even a badly done relocation is often better than the snake being killed. But that being said, I think that there's the majority of the work is not being performed by a lot of the kind of enthusiasm driven stuff. So I'm gonna, so I'm not saying anybody shouldn't do it, but I should say everybody should that does it should strive to increase their knowledge to make sure it's being done well. Temperature continues to drop in here, so I think the storm is. I just heard some thunder out there, so it's almost time. Um, have I ever had to remove a snake from inside my own house? No, not yet. I will at some point. The only snake I've ever found inside my house was a dead black-headed snake, a baby one that was flat. I think I tracked it in on the bottom of my boot. So as dumb as this, that's it. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. But thanks so much for spending some time and for those good questions. Oh, wow, this is almost 3 hours. I was thinking it'd be like an hour. So maybe I should do this more often with fewer questions. But expect a new video to come out either tomorrow or the next day, and then we'll get back right on track. We have a lot of cool stuff to talk about. We have the rest of our season to get to. We will be talking about our trip to Mexico in coordination with the stakeholders in that project. And if you aren't already, if you're on Facebook, our Facebook page is just facebook.com/snake removal. We have a lot of information on there and other questions. So if you like what we're doing here and use Facebook still, that's kind of a good extension of what that is. And only pitch I'm going to do here is if you appreciate what we're doing, the information, stuff you learned, it means a lot if you tell some people about us, tell some people that are scared of snakes about us, tell them that they can maybe not be scared of snakes if they're willing to do it. And also, if you are interested in stuff like this sticker or whatever, just go to rattlesnakesolutions.tv. We have all kinds of t-shirts and silly stuff there that we're going to be increasing in the future. So with that, I'm going to get out of here, go inside and watch the storm from inside my house, inside of my office. Thanks again. See you later.